네, 장내에 계신 분들께 잠시 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 행사가 곧 시작될 예정입니다. 2022 서울 국제 안심소득 포럼에 참석해 주신 국내
Good morning,
참석자 여러분,
ladies and
그리고
gentlemen.
온라인으로 시청해
Welcome to the
주시는
Seoul
국내
International
그리고
Forum on
세계
Safety
각국의
Income
여러분 인사드리겠습니다.
2022. I
저는
would
오늘
like to
포럼의
welcome all of
사회를
you who are
맡은
joining us
아나운서
online and here at the
조주연입니다.
venue.
인사드리겠습니다.
I am Cho Ju-yeon and I am the MC for today's forum.
Ladies and gentlemen, and all of our participants joining in from home and abroad on the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2022, welcome. And my name is Ju-yeon Cho, and it is indeed an honor to be your MC for this forum. 네, 서울시는 약자와의 동행을
The Seoul
시정
Metropolitan
최우선
Government's
가치로
top priority
삼고
is
소외되는
going
사람
together
없이
with the
사회
socially
구성원 모두가
neglected,
인간다운
and we are
생활을
aiming to
보장받을 수
design a
있는
welfare model
미래
which
복지 모델을
ensures that all
설계하기 위해
members of the
올해
society
10월부터
can live
저소득층을
dignified lives and no one is left behind.
소득
That is why the
보장
city
정책인
launched a pilot project
안심소득
called the
시범
Safety
사업을
Income
실시하고
Program
있습니다.
to target the
올해
low-income
처음으로
groups from
개최되는
July
이번
of this year.
2022 서울 국제 안심
The first ever Seoul International Forum on Safety Income is being held this year and will provide us with the opportunity to learn about Seoul City's experiment and progress and also share experiences with US, Finland, and Germany that are also implementing guaranteed income experiments. The forum will provide a venue for global discussion on new guaranteed income policies. And before we begin today's discussions, I would like to first of all introduce the distinguished guests who have graced us with their presence at the opening ceremony. When I call on them, please rise and say hello to all of the participants who are joining us here at the venue. Kim Hyung-gi, Chairman of Seoul Metropolitan Council, has joined us. Thank you. President of Korea National Council on Social Welfare, Mr. Seo Sang-mo. We have Yoo Man-hee, the Vice Chair of the Health Welfare Committee of Seoul Metropolitan Council. We also have Yoon Hyung-hee, member of Seoul Metropolitan Council Health and Welfare Committee. And we also have member of Seoul Metropolitan Council, Hwang Yu-jung, also member of the Health and Welfare Committee. We have Professor Kim Won-sop from Korea University. We also have Professor Kim Jin-young from Korea University. And we also have Professor Park Jung-min from Seoul National University. We also have Oh Ho-young, the Senior Research Fellow from Korea Research Institute for Vocational Education and Training, joining us. We have Yoo Jong-sung, a professor from Gachon University, joining us. We have Lee Jung-min, professor at Seoul National University, joining us. And we also have Lee Jong-hwa joining us. He is the president of the Korea Economic Association. We have Chung Sun-dur, professor at Ewha Women's University, joining us. And we also have Hong Kyung-jun, professor at Songkyungkwan University, joining us. And we also have Chairman Kim Hyun-eun of Seoul Welfare Association. We have Vice President of Shinhan Bank, Park Sung-hyun, joining us. And we also have Mr. Kim Sang-chul, who is the president of the Seoul Welfare Foundation, joining us. And last but not least, we have the host of today's international forum, the mayor of Seoul Metropolitan City, Mayor Oh Se-hoon, joining us. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope that through today's forum, we will have diverse discussions on the new welfare model. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now kick off today's ceremony. First, it is my pleasure and honor to now invite the Mayor of Seoul Metropolitan City, Mayor Oh Se-hoon, to the stage for his welcoming remarks. Please welcome him with a very warm round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, I heartily welcome you to the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2022. Thank you for joining us. First, I would like to thank Kim Hyung-gi, Chairman of Seoul Metropolitan Council, Seo Sang-mo, President of Korean National Council on Social Welfare, Mr. Michael Tubbs, the founder and chair of Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, and also Professor Robert Moffitt of Johns Hopkins University for joining us despite their busy schedule. Furthermore, I would also like to thank the moderators for today's forum, Professor Lee Jong-hwa, President of the Korean Economic Association, and Professor Yoo Jong-sung of Kwachon University, as well as the many experts from home and abroad who will join us and share their insight. I would also like to thank and welcome the citizens who have taken interest in the future welfare system and for joining us online and here also at the venue. The forum, which is being held under the theme Searching for a New Welfare Model to Go Together with the Socially Neglected, is the first global venue for discussion that will examine the future direction of welfare systems and share the progress of the Seoul Safety Income project, which took off in July this year as part of the Seoul's policy experiment, as well as the overseas guaranteed income experiments in Finland, Germany, and US. With changes in the labor market due to the accelerated digital transition and climate change and prolonged COVID-19, around the world, poverty and inequality has exacerbated. And currently, countries around the world are engaging in various discussions and research to find solutions. The situation in Korea is also very difficult. COVID-19 pandemic and the ramifications of economic crisis has disproportionately affected the vulnerable. The low-income groups face more difficulties, and we continue to hear about tragic incidences where people have taken their own lives after living under unbearable hardship. As we can see, the current welfare system's limitation is explicitly coming to surface, and more than any other time, we need a shift to a new guaranteed income system. So through the Seoul Safety Income project, which is a Korean-style guaranteed income experiment, will strongly protect the vulnerable and create a new welfare system of the future where citizens are guaranteed a dignified life and there are no welfare blind spots. We will sever the vicious cycle of poverty and devastation and create a future-oriented welfare model in which more people can live a life worth of human dignity. This is a message that Seoul Metropolitan City would like to convey to the international community through this forum. With the beginning of today's forum, we will launch the Global Guaranteed Income Network and establish an exchange and research cooperation network with overseas cities, academic and research organizations. Together, we will create a sustainable welfare system for the future. I hope that the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2022 will provide us with a valuable opportunity to gather our wisdom and create a consensus to find solutions to poverty and inequality. I would like to once again thank everyone for joining us today. So once again, thank you very much. So thank you very much, Mayor, for your meaningful words and for kicking off our forum today. As a citizen of Seoul City, as the Mayor mentioned, I hope that today's forum will provide us with a valuable opportunity to find solutions to addressing inequality and poverty. And next, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Kim Hyung-gi, Chairman of Seoul Metropolitan City, to deliver his congratulatory remarks. Please welcome the chairman to the stage with a very warm round of applause. So as you can see, I am shorter the mayor. Oh, so I have to adjust my mic. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to meet you. I am Kim Hyung-gi, Chairman of Seoul Metropolitan Council. I would like to congratulate the hosting of the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2022. I would like to express my gratitude to the Mayor of Seoul Metropolitan City, Oh Se-hoon, also President Seo Sang-mok of the Korea National Council on Social Welfare, as well as the experts from home and abroad for organizing this venue for discussion and for sharing their insight. Many countries around the world have welfare system in place to protect the socially vulnerable. In Korea, during the foreign currency crisis, massive unemployment and poverty was serious, and we enacted the National Basic Living Security Act in 1999. And 20 years has passed. There has been a lot of progress, but there is still welfare blind spots being created, and so people are saying that we need to improve our existing welfare system. So in Korea, in Seoul City, there are slums and there are many people living there. But those people are not covered under the National Basic Livelihood Security System. Only 20% of these poorest of the poor are covered under the National Basic Livelihood Security System. So many people are vulnerable to inequality and poverty. So the Seoul Metropolitan City has introduced the Seoul Safety Income project as an alternative solution. So regarding the protection of the socially underprivileged, there was controversy over basic income, which represents universal welfare, and selective welfare, represented by safety income. I think the key is to guarantee the minimum standard of living for the low-income class and the rights to live with dignity as humans. However, once a welfare system is implemented, it's difficult to terminate it. And since full-scale implementation of safety income requires enormous financial resources, its effectiveness and validity must be rigorously proven through this pilot project. The Seoul Metropolitan Council will also closely examine all the processes and results of the Safe Income pilot project. We will also review next year's budget with this in mind. So the members of the Seoul Metropolitan Council are joining us here today, and they are reviewing this project in depth. I hope that this forum will serve as a meaningful opportunity to create a more advanced welfare system for the future and to reduce welfare blind spots and also address income inequality. Right now, the holidays are near, and so we are reminded of our neighbors who are more underprivileged. There are many ways for us to help those who are socially neglected, so I hope you will do your part and try to create a more warm and caring society. I hope everyone has enjoyable holidays. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We heard from Kim Hyun-gi, Chairman of Seoul Metropolitan Council's congratulatory remarks. Next, we will be hearing from the President of Korea National Council on Social Welfare, Mr. Sang-mok Ho. He will deliver his congratulatory remarks. Please give him a big hand. Hello everyone, I am Seo Sang-mok, President of the Korea National Council on Social Welfare, and we are gathered here today to seek a new welfare system to move forward in harmony with the socially neglected. And I would like to extend my gratitude to Seoul City Mayor Oh Se-hoon and also the staff for hosting this international forum. Last week, I was in Spain because of a social inclusion international conference held in Spain, and I arrived late last night. So social inclusion is, I believe, going together with the socially neglected. And the United Nations states leaving no one behind. It means that we all should go together. Therefore, going together with the socially neglected has become an international theme. So the purpose and the goal is good indeed. However, how are we going to achieve and obtain this goal and aim? And I believe that this will be related to the various policies that need to be pursued. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many people lost their jobs, and this has led to a reduction in their income. And 40% of workers are not covered by labor insurance. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we realized that there are many loopholes in our existing social safety net. That is why the government had to distribute cash handouts. And this happened not only in Korea, but in Japan and in the United States. However, this is a more short-term measure. We need to have mid to long-term measures. And one way to do so would be to guarantee a certain income for all. And there is now a social consensus on this matter. And as a means to do so, the first method is universal basic income, and we have centuries of history of UBI. In the case of UBI, it requires an enormous budget because basic income is distributed to all. If we wanted to distribute 300,000 to all Koreans, this will be 170 trillion, requires 170 trillion in budget. And there is a negative income tax that was argued by Friedman, an important economist, and so it is a income system that supports certain wages. And so the issue here is about whether people will want to work, because if you do not have work, then that gap will be covered by government support. Therefore, for the low-income people, it will be a disincentive for work. And in order to complement these two aspects of these two systems, we have come up with the Safety Income Project. This is most realistic, and there is the biggest probability of implementing the Safety Income Project. And this is the background for coming up with this Seoul Safety Income Project. And in this sense, I believe that it is very meaningful that we are holding this international conference. I hope that we can gather a lot of good opinions on this. And currently, Seoul Safety Income Project is being carried out. And this system cannot be carried out by Seoul City alone. It has to be expanded nationwide. And in order to do so, we need to understand exactly what has to be done. Also, we have hundreds of social welfare systems already. Therefore, we need to have a comprehensive plan to coordinate with these other social welfare systems. And I want to thank the organizers for preparing this international conference. And I think we have here with us renowned experts from home and abroad. And I hope that we will be able to come up with supplementary measures that will be needed for this to be carried out nationwide. Thank you.
So thank you very much. That was Seo Sang-mok, President of Korea National Council on Social Welfare. Thank you once again for your insightful remarks. Also, we have Professor Park Ki-sung joining us. He is professor at Seongshin Women's University. So thank you very much for joining us. All the way from the United States, someone is joining us online, and he is the former mayor of Stockton City and also the founder of Mayors for Guaranteed Income. It is our pleasure to now introduce Mr. Michael Tubbs.
Michael Tubbs here, former mayor of the city of Stockton, California. I'm current chair and founder of Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, an organization of over 100 mayors in the United States piloting guaranteed income programs, and your brother, your friend in this movement to eliminate poverty from our cities, from our provinces, from our countries, and from indeed our world. I want to say first, it's an absolute honor to be in conversation. I'd like to congratulate the leadership on embarking on what I think 100 years from now will be looked upon as something so simple. The idea that with so much growth, with so much wealth, with so many resources, that no one, no matter who it is or what they've done, should have absolute nothing, and that the mark of a civilized society is a society that provides for the basic necessities needed to be human. And that's what drove me in 2007 to launch the first guaranteed income program in the United States. This notion of not about just guaranteed income or universal basic income, but really this notion of universal human dignity. The idea that no one in my city should have nothing, should have what we know Maslow tells us humans need to survive and thrive. So congratulations on embarking on something that the whole world will be watching. And not really just an experiment in terms of how money is spent, because we know, like we've seen in Stockton, California, where I was mayor, that people spend money the way people spend money, on necessities. Not just the health impacts. We know that when people are less stressed, they're healthier. And a lot of stress people have is because they don't have money. And not about whether folks need to know how to spend money. We also know that it's not that people don't know how to spend money, it's oftentimes that people don't have money to spend. And we also know that people are working, and the issue isn't work, it's wages. It isn't work, it's wealth. It isn't work, it's a structure that produces great outcomes for a few based off the labor of the many of whom can't afford one emergency, can't afford housing, can't afford shelter, etc. And the fact that, so I say that to say, what's really interesting about this isn't going to be the data. It's about the story we tell about how we are all deserving, how we are all worthy, how none of us deserve to have anything less than what's required to be human, that we don't have to earn our dignity, but our dignity is endowed in us by our Creator. And the job of any civilized society is to create the structures and the policies that bring out, that emphasize, that accelerate that dignity. So again, as you can tell, I'm excited. Congratulations. Thank you for your leadership. Indeed, the world and the future is watching and saying thank you, thank you, thank you for having the courage to break paradigms and to say, let's eliminate poverty. Let's provide a guaranteed income. Let's show that we understand as a government, as a key function of governance, the need to treat all of our constituents with dignity and with policies that reflect that understanding, the most fundamental of that being economic security, the ability to provide for food, housing, and shelter at the very least. So again, congratulations. I'm so excited. I can't wait to work with you all to make this a reality worldwide and a policy worldwide.
네, 좋은 말씀 그리고 응원의 말씀
Thank you
다시
very
한번
much,
감사합니다.
and also thank you very much
이제
for the words
결심을
of
이것으로
encouragement. With this, we
마무리하고
will
바로
be
각국의
concluding the
새로운
opening
복지제도
ceremony
실험이라는
and then go
주제로
on to session
세션
1,
발표와
experiments
토론을
across
이어가
the
보도록
world. We will
하겠습니다.
hear presentations
세션에
and then
들어가기에
have a
앞서서
discussion.
잠시 주요
But before
내빈께서
we go
함께
on to
하시는
session
사진
1,
촬영
we
시간을
will
가지도록
have a
하겠습니다.
group photo
또한
session
무대
with our
위에 있는
VIPs,
이 패널
and we
좌석을
also need
설치를 하기
to
위해서
organize
2, 3분
the
정도 시간이
stage
필요할
for the
텐데요.
next 2 to 3
참석자
minutes to prepare for
여러분께서는
session
자리에서
1. We
잠시만
kindly
대기해
ask the
주시면
participants
저희가 바로
to
진행하도록
wait
하겠습니다.
patiently in
자,
their
그러면
seats.
시장님과 주요 내빈분들께서는
We would like to
앞쪽으로
ask
함께
our
올라오셔서
mayor
사진
and
촬영에
the
임해주시면
VIPs to come
감사하겠습니다.
up to
앞쪽으로
the
모시겠습니다.
stage for the group photo.
네, 무대 옆에 있는 계단을 통해서 올라와 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Please come up to the stage using the stairs on the side.
네, 좌우측에 모두 다 계단이 있습니다. 편한 쪽으로 네, 이제 다 준비가 된 것 같습니다. 이제 첫 번째 세션 이제 바로 진행할 준비가 됐습니다.
We are now
첫
ready
번째
to begin
세션에서는
session 1.
각국의
In
새로운
session 1,
제도
we will be
실험이라는
hearing
주제로
about
진행됩니다.
experiments across the world.
발표자분들은
And
토론자분들이
we have presenters and discussants.
토론자분들입니다. 그래서 무대 위로
So
먼저
we would
모시겠습니다.
like to ask the discussants to come up to the stage and to take their
올라와주시면
seats.
하겠습니다. 마련된 자리에
Once the
착석
discussants have been seated, we will begin session 1.
네, 이제 착석이 완료됐기
So I think everyone
제가
has taken
참여하시는
their
분들을
seats, and I would now like to introduce the discussants. We have prominent experts and leaders joining us, but due to time constraints, we kindly ask for your understanding that we're only able to briefly introduce them. The moderator for the first session is Professor Lee Jong-ha from Korea University. Professor Lee Jong-ha is currently the Dean of the Political and Economic Department at Korea University, and is also president of the Korea Economic Association. Please allow me to introduce our overseas presenters. So joining us virtually, Professor Heiki Hilamo is a research professor at National Institute for Health and Welfare and a professor of social policy at University of Helsinki. And in 2016, he was awarded the State Award for Public Information. And we will also, our speaker from Germany will also join us virtually. Dr. Jürgen Schrupp is a professor of sociology at University of Berlin and senior research fellow at the German Institute for Economic Research. And the U.S. presentation will be delivered us via video because it is early in the morning there. Professor Sadie West is an associate professor at the University of Tennessee's College of Social Work and is the co-founder and director of the Center for Guaranteed Income Research at the University of Pennsylvania. So her presentation will be loaded on our website, so we hope you will all take a look at our website and also her presentation. I would now like to introduce our discussant, Mayor Oh Se-eun of Seoul Metropolitan City. He was serving as a member of the National Assembly in 2000, and he also served as the 33rd and 34th Mayor of Seoul Metropolitan City from 2006 to 2011. And from April of 2021, he is once again serving as the Mayor of Seoul Metropolitan City. I would now like to introduce Mr. Michael Tops. He is the founder of Mayors of a Guaranteed Income and also the founder of End Poverty in California. He was the former mayor of Stockton, California. And joining us through Zoom is Professor Kim Hyun-chul. He is an associate professor in the Economics Department and Division of Public Policy at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And then we have Professor Kim Won-seop joining us. Currently, he is a professor at the Sociology Department at Korea University, and he is also director of the Korea Social Research Institution. Last but not least, we have Professor Park Jung-min of Seoul National University. He is teaching sociology and welfare at Seoul National University, and he is carrying out research about poverty, household debt, housing, and health. And we will now kick off the first session. With that said, I would now like to hand the floor over to our moderator, Professor Lee Jong-ha. So thank you very much. I am the moderator for the first session. I am Lee Jong-ha from Korea University. I would like to say that it is a great honor to take part in the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2022. We will now begin the panel discussion for the first session of today's forum. So first is a video that will introduce us to the Seoul Safety Income project, and then we will hear presentations from Finland and Germany, and then we will have a panel discussion with the discussants joining us here at the venue and also who are joining us virtually through Zoom. So first, why don't we take a look at the special video.
「 How can we go about resolving concerns of deepening poverty and inequality? Seoul Safety Income Project. SSIP is a new welfare model that revamps the current social welfare system. The international community is testing out its own potential solutions. The U.S. began to tackle the issue of poverty through its Universal Basic Income experiment in Stockton, California in 2019, and is now planning as well as executing in over 100 cities across the nation, including Los Angeles and Chicago. Finland conducted the experiment with basic income to unemployed people with the hope that it would provide a stronger incentive to work. Berlin, Germany is experimenting to find out the effect of a basic income on the middle class. Canada, Spain, Netherlands, and many more are conducting similar experiments. The Seoul Safety Income Project was launched in July 2022, following the sequence of international experiments. What changes will ensue after the implementation of SSIP? First, SSIP has a significantly expanded eligibility criteria.
현행 복지제도는 기준이 엄격해서 아주 어려운 계층만 받잖아요. 근데 안심소득은 선정 절차가 까다롭지가 않아서 서울 시민의 3분의 1이 지원받을 수 있다고 합니다.
Second, SSIP provides more assistance to those in need.
저소득 가구들에게 지원금을 모두 똑같이 주는 게 아니라 소득이 적을수록 더 많은 금액을 주니까 합리적이죠. 소득 격차도 줄어들 수 있고요.
Third, SSIP reduces poverty and resolves the issues of welfare blind spots.
서울 시민 88만 가구가 추가로 지원받는다고 하더라고요. 위기 가구는 당연히 먼저죠. 그래서 안심소득을 빈곤층 추락을 막아주는 안전장치라고 하나 봐요.
Reducing welfare blind spots to improve social safety net and alleviating income inequality by giving more to the poorer. SSIP is a fair and inclusive welfare program of the future. SSIP promotes citizens' stable livelihood and new challenges. Beyond local welfare in Seoul to nationwide welfare of Korea. Beyond struggling with life's difficulties to living a humane life. Seoul is with you. Seoul stands in solidarity with the disadvantaged. Seoul provides assurance for everyone's safety. The only solution to the welfare blind spots of Korea. Seoul Safety Income.
예, 아주 잘 만든 영상인 것
So
같아요.
I think that was a great video. So if you saw some of the overseas cases in the video. So we're first going to hear about Finland from Professor Heikki Hilamo. I understand he's joining us virtually via Zoom. So Professor Hilamo, if you could begin your presentation.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from Helsinki. I'm really honored to have this opportunity to talk about the Finnish basic income experiment, which was conducted in 2017 and 2018. So there are a number of unique features with this experiment, and one of them was that this experiment was actually implemented by a conservative coalition government. Currently, we have a government with 5 female party heads, but then we had 3 male party heads, and normally basic income as an initiative has been supported by left-wing parties and green parties, but those were not in power when the basic income experiment in Finland took place. So I will first talk about the labor market context of the experiment and then also the social security context of the experiment. So as many countries, we are facing rapid population aging, which put pressure on public finances, and our participation rates have not been very, very high. So incentives to work, they've been a major political theme for a long time. But there still has been quite modest investment in active labor market policy measures. And we know that those measures are not always effective in activating participants, especially those who have facing multiple obstacles to labor market. So the main theme of this experiment was to improve labor market incentives and increase labor market participation. Another issue is that if we have a country which already has an social security system which is closest to basic income, I would argue that it is actually Finland, since we have every legal citizen has an entitlement to basic amount of social assistance, and that amount cannot be sanctioned completely. It can be reduced by 20 or 40%, but only for two months. So you could say that we already have a kind of a basic income system in place. Of course, that's not unconditional, but we have this guaranteed income system, and that also includes full support for a rent. So in that sense, Finland has already a system which is quite close to basic income, or actually is a system of guaranteed income. So some words about the features of the experiment. I think what's really the most unique feature was that this was the first national basic income experiment which was implemented through passing a law. So most of the other experiments, they are based on random sampling or on self-enrollment, but this was implemented through passing a law. So the experiment period was 2 years, and the first results were just released before the end of the government mandate period, and the final results were released in 2020. And currently there are more results coming from the experiment. So this experiment, it raised a lot of international interest. And there were also a lot of misunderstandings around the experiment. So this was not a full basic income experiment or universal basic income. This was just a partial basic income experiment focusing on those who were long-term unemployed. Of course, we didn't have the possibility to evaluate dynamic or system level effects. So we didn't have any kind of a saturation side as there was in the city of Manitoba in the previous minimum income scheme in Canada. And then what's also important to emphasize that this randomized controlled trial setting was in place only to study the employment outcomes, but not the subjective well-being outcomes. We didn't have a baseline survey, and I will come back to that in a moment. So here's the experimental setting. So we had 2,000 people in the control group, in the experiment group, and all those who were getting the social assistance unemployment benefit or flat rate unemployment benefit, they were the control group. So 173,000 persons, and everybody was getting the same amount. For those in the experiment group, that was unconditional, and for those who in the control group, it was treatment as usual, so it was conditional. The target population was between 25 and 58, so we didn't want to include people who were really young and supposed to be studying, or those who were really close to the retirement, and duration was 2 years. So as to the employment outcomes, we were able to utilize monthly register data, so very reliable register data, and we were basically testing 3 different overlapping mechanisms. One was, firstly, it was the income disregard. So those who were in the experiment group, they were able to keep the basic income even if they would get a job. So there were huge incentive to increase income from work. Then there was, secondly, there was absence of sanctions. So if those who were getting basic income, they were not forced to participate in any active labor market policy measures or for example, training. And thirdly, there was an absence of bureaucracy. So there was no need to report incomes or to be concerned about possible paybacks of excess benefits in case of getting income from work. So the hypotheses to be tested were that since there was the income disregard, better incentives for work, we would have an improved employment. And secondly, for absence and sanctions and bureaucracy, people may become lazy and stop seeking employment, or that people may release their employment potential when those mandatory measures and involved bureaucracy were removed. But basically, the expectation was that there would be improvement in employment. So the first year results actually didn't show any change in employment. So as you see from this table, for those in the treatment group, on average they were working almost 50 days, and in the control group it was almost the same. So there was no statistical difference between the treatment group and the control group. Why I'm talking about the first year results is that during the second year, another employment measure was implemented, something which was called the activation model, which was a sanctioning regime or a sanctioning policy. And that was really detrimental for the experiment, since it actually meant that it was not possible to study the employment effects for the second year. And it also showed that the government was not really keen on implementing any kind of a basic income policy, since they completely changed direction when implementing this activation model. So the final results were that there was only an increase of 6 days of work in the treatment group. But what's important is to say that this was an effect, the joint effect of the basic income experiment and the activation model, since the activation model was implemented during the second year of the basic income experiment. And the final conclusion from the research group was that this huge carrot included in the basic income model did not actually work in increasing employment. A second quite surprising result was that they were not forced to participate in any active labor market policy measures. But still, the majority of people getting the basic income, they wanted to participate in those measures, which seemed that they didn't have a problem with the conditionality of employment services. So some basic income advocates say that people are very negative about active labor market policy measures and take them as a kind of a sanctioning policy or a welfare to work arrangement. But that was not the case in Finland. So people actually registered for the active labor market policy measures, even though they were not, even though they did not have to do that. Then we also studied the well-being effects, or the subjective well-being effects, at the end of the period. And the survey was conducted just 2 months before the end of the experiment period, and the survey studying a wide range of subjective well-being measures showed a significant difference between the key indicators representing different aspects of subjective well-being. So basic income recipients, they assess their well-being way more positively than the respondents in the control group. So there were higher generalized and institutionalized trust. There was increased confidence in the future, better self-confidence, less symptoms of depression, and better cognitive function. Also, the perception of financial well-being among the basic income recipients was better. They also experienced less bureaucracy. So overall, a wide range of positive outcomes. Of course, there was a kind of a caveat since there was no baseline survey, and there was a very low response rate in the control group. So only 20% answered the survey. So there is a possible selection mechanism, and also what needs to be taken into account that since this very unpopular activation model was introduced, that also contaminated the control group and the treatment group, which might have resulted in some selection effects. But summary of the results is that there was no or very little effect on employment, but a positive view of the active labor market policy measures and also positive experience of the basic income in the survey. These results are very much in accordance with the results from other experiments implemented in other countries like Canada, US, Netherlands, or the city of Barcelona in Spain. So there is a greater effect on well-being than on employment. So why there was such a minor change in employment? I think it's that the fact that the financial incentives, they play a role, but alone they are not enough to significantly promote labor market participation. And since this was an experiment focusing on long-term unemployment facing multiple obstacles to open labor markets, so this just one change in financial incentives was not enough to improve their situation. Some other learnings or lessons from the experiment was that there was a quite small experiment budget. So that's why it was not possible to study the effects of basic income in more detail. There were also some other issues concerning how the payment was made. So, for example, we have a child supplement in basic unemployment compensation, and that was not included in basic income. But perhaps the biggest caveat or biggest threat was this new activation model, which was highly unpopular, and it caused citizens' activism and aggressive protest, and that had an effect on the second year results. So as finally some words about the future of basic income in Finland. Currently we have a parliamentary committee discussing a major overhaul of our social security system. Basic income is not studied there, but this reform could implement elements of partial basic income or something which is called participation income, a policy which is quite similar to basic income, but it's not unconditional. So there is a condition that you'll contribute somehow to your community. It doesn't need to be a labor market participation. It can be voluntary work, for example, and that'll give you entitlement to participation income. There has been also calls for new experiments, especially experiments studying the bureaucracy, the so-called bureaucracy traps. So I think this basic income compared with the expectations, I think it was a disappointment, but in the long run, and if you just think about incremental reforms, I think this was one minor step towards less means testing and towards less conditionality in our minimum social security system. That's all from my side. I think I have already gone through the summary, so I'll thank you for your attention and look forward for discussing this topic further. Thank you.
예, 힐라모 교수님 감사합니다. 핀란드의 기본소득 실험 결과를
Thank you, Professor, for introducing the basic income of Finland.
Next, Professor Regan Schiff will talk about the German's case study. So the floor is yours, Professor.
Hello from my side, and thank you very much for the possibility to talk and to present some results here from a German ongoing experiment. I hope you can see the slides. This is joint work from my colleagues And me, I'm at the German Institute for Economic Research in Berlin, and this is just an ongoing experiment, not funded by the federal taxpayer, but by the civil society. And well, there's also a long discussion in Germany about UBI, and but there, as we have a similar situation as in Finland, we have an existing well-developed welfare state in Germany with a long tradition of 150 years. And there has a UBI would be really a system change. And because this would, in the existing system, you have you have the obligation to help yourself and your family to get along and to solve your problems. And currently in our parliament we have no political party who is promoting such a system. But we have a transition currently. We will introduce a so-called citizen income that is means tested starting next year, and this just came through the parliament. But so talking about UBI in Germany, there is about 50% of the population is in favor in general and could think of introducing such a system, but to test a UBI, we need at the moment so-called social entrepreneurs who just try whether a UBI works. And the idea, and this idea has been introduced by an association, the Berlin-based association Mein Grundeinkommen. They started since 2014 to give just randomly people who enroll voluntary and registered to get a basic income of 1,000 euros per month unconditionally for a period of 1 year. And they are very successful. More than 1,300 people up to now got just such a possibility of 1 year unconditional basic income, and all groups are covered for people, and the funding is based by the so-called crowdhounds from the civil society and by crowdfunding to finance that experiment. And in sum, you have about 15 million euros that this association has redistributed in the last 6 years. So the idea I want to talk about is a scientific pilot project to find out whether by a randomized control study, whether such a basic income given to the middle class, and that is our focus group, how they will behave. And so we took the idea of that social entrepreneurs and their financing stuff, and selected a group of 122 of the so-called treatment group, and they will get a basic income of 1,200 euros for the period of 3 years. And we will want to find out whether this will make a difference and whether some stereotypes will fulfill, that they will get lazy or lay off their job, for example. So what we did, we started in August 2020 with the recruitment of that experiment in Germany, and about 2 million individuals have been recruited and enrolled to participate. And from that huge group, we took 20,000 individuals for a baseline study with an online that started in March 21. And from this, we selected the participants of 1,500, and of those 1,122 have been now the treatment group with the first payment of 1,200 euros per month since 2021. And we have a control group of 1,380 that don't get the payment, but are statistical twins to those 122. So as I said already, we are focusing. We cannot get rid of the existing welfare system. So we look into the group who are not part of getting benefits, means tested benefits. We go to the threshold above. That means people in the age group of 21 to 40, one person households, and 1,200 to 2,600 euros. And then on top, you get the 1,200 euros per month. So this is the design of our study. We have 6 waves of the study where we have online surveys every 6 months. And we just finished the survey and the focus wave 2. That means we have now, with a baseline study, 4 waves to look whether they have differences between the control group and the treatment group. And we will present preliminary results and publish preliminary results next August with those 4 waves. The study will end in June 24, and you can expect the final report in autumn 2024. So I still don't have results of that study. I can just talk about the research topics of our experiment. In the Finnish study also, we are looking on time and labor and the labor force participation, and on what do they do with the 1,200 euros given on top, and so what kind of consumptions they use. Do they save the money? Do they use it for their own individual investment, or what? Or do they travel? So this is an open question we want to find out. And of course, we are not only looking on objective indicators, but also on a rich set of individual psychological traits and well-being, and also social and political engagement. That means, what do they do with their time if they get additional safety net? So what the study really can find out, this is just the scope of individual changes in behavior and in attitudes in all areas of life, more or less. And of course, we will focus in the first set of results on individual effects on labor supply and job choice. And of course, what we and from those findings, we expect that we can improve and derive better calculations for financing models, also of a broader UBI. So that is just a little piecework of a puzzle for the discussion of, for the overall discussion of UBI. And I want finish with my last slide and to emphasize that we should not overemphasize the findings of such a randomized control group, because we will not find out any effects of long-term basic income payments above those 3 years. That is usual disclaimer. And of course, we have randomized individuals, so effects in neighborhoods we will not cover with our study. And of course, we will not find out whether introducing a UBI will have effects on production and consumption, and also on taxes that are required for financing such a system. And of course, also whether UBI will have changes in migration flows, either in inflows to a country, or for those who have to finance UBI of outflows of migration. So those other issues I want to emphasize again, it's just a small puzzle and contribution, but it's based on a research design in a scientific, quantitative research setting. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to participate in the discussion. Thank you very much.
예, 슈퍼 교수님 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Professor Schuper.
3시 반까지 시간이 있는데요. 약
We have
15분
until
정도
3:30, so I think we
남아
have
있습니다.
about 25 minutes
토론은
left, and we have 5 discussants.
최대한 시간을
So we will try to be very efficient with the time given to us. So I would like to ask each discussant to limit their remarks to 3 or 4 minutes. And once we hear from everyone, I think we'll be able to further our discussion. So first, I would like to invite the mayor to share with us his thoughts. So we heard the presentation about Finland from Professor Heikki Hillamo. Thank you very much for your detailed explanation. And we also heard from Professor Jürgen Schöp about the basic income pilot project in Germany. So thank you very much for your detailed presentation. If I were to summarize, if you look at for Finland, their pilot project, it doesn't seem to emphasize, or there were too much changes in terms of employment incentive. So I think that's what sort of stood out for me. And I think for safety income project in Korea, that's an important part for us. So if you have any subjective assessments or qualitative assessments, I think that's important in terms of looking at people's well-being and so forth. So, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, there are many people who are in the welfare blind spot, and in Korea, some of them have taken their own lives. We see income polarization becoming very common throughout the world, and there are people, who are taking their own lives. We have to reduce these numbers and create a new welfare system so that people's employment motivation goes up and more people can enjoy welfare benefits. And for those people who are receiving welfare benefits, we also have to make sure, that they are not offended or hurt. We have to make sure that we maintain and protect their dignity. So this is some of the goal as we introduce SSIP. For the next 3 years through the SSIP, there are objectives that we would like to realize. And I know that we need to minimize trial and error as we try to attain our goals. Currently, it's a pilot project, and we will have to improve and modify our pilot project so that we can maximize the benefits and minimize the side effects. So this is some of the expectations, so to speak, I have about SSIP. And there are many countries who have carried out pilot projects ahead of us. And our pilot project, I hope, can be analyzed with a diverse perspective and look at the strengths and weaknesses of our project. So our standard is 85% of the standard median income, and the gap between their income and the standard median income, the gap 50% is supported through SSIP. So after a year, if we can, we maybe change that 85% standard and we're now supporting 50% of that income gap, but maybe we can actually change that to 30 to 40%. So we want to do different attempts in terms of our experiment. However, I'm sure when we try to, so I'm sure that in order to have a thorough analysis of the pilot project results, it will be hard to make so many sudden changes. So for us, I think the best option is to get the insight of many experts and apply that to our SSIP. I hope that through today's forum, we will be able to look at how we can improve the analytical tools that we can apply to SSIP. And we want to share confidently with the international community the results of SSIP. So I hope that the forum will help us to better analyze the process and results of SSIP. And we look forward to the insight and wisdom of the experts who are leading this area. And so that is why I'm come here and taking part in this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor, for giving us detailed information of SSIP, and we will be able to hear further from our mayor later on. Next, we would like to ask Michael Tubbs for his remarks.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And let me start with saying I, like the mayor, appreciate the rigor in the discussion around data and outcomes, but I want to start by taking a step back and hope that we all recognize that the current system we live in was not studied, was not tested, nor is it rooted in evidence. It's more rooted in bias. It's produced the terrible outcomes we complain about. So I want to start by saying we can't let perfect be the enemy of better, because we know in America, in Germany, in Finland, in South Korea, there are people just like me and you who lack basic levels of dignity because they have to live with the inhumane conditions of poverty. I think it's interesting that no matter where you are in the world, in the United States, probably the prime example, that there's people that our current systems leave people out who need help, make it hard, at least in America, to get help, because once you get better, you lose the help you had, so you take 2 steps back. And I think the work we're doing to build something better is incredibly inspiring and important. And I'm glad we're doing this together globally. But let's start with that the status is not working, and we have a responsibility to make it better. And we can't spend 50 years testing and trying and piloting. At some point, we have to launch and iterate and build as we go, because again, this current system was not tested, was not analyzed, and is not producing the outcomes we deserve or want to see. So in Stockton, we initiated a guaranteed income program that's now been emulated by 100 cities in the United States, including the big cities you hear about, like Los Angeles and Chicago, as mentioned in the video. And because America lacks many of the basic social safety net inputs you all have, the results we've seen have been different. So in Stockton, we gave 125 people $500 a month. And what we saw was that actually, because there aren't robust social safety nets and there aren't robust supports for housing and childcare, et cetera, in the States, we actually saw employment increase. We saw that those who received the guaranteed income were 2 times more likely to be 2 times less likely, to be unemployed than those who did not receive the guaranteed income. And we also saw that those who received the guaranteed income were 2 times more likely to go from part-time to full-time employment than those who did not receive the guaranteed income. And I think what's consistent across pilots is that we see no labor market impacts. So I think we can all put to rest the lie that allowing people to have a baseline level of economic security does not force people, does not make people stop working, that people aren't inherently lazy. In fact, the vast majority of people who can work do work. And if folks aren't working, it's because there's usually some barriers or some mental health issues or a disability or they're doing work inside the home, like child rearing, taking care of elderly parents, which is also still work. And as the video mentioned to start this, the fact that the fourth industrial revolution is coming, the fact that now everyone across the world is playing with the AI generator to make beautiful portraits of themselves, illustrate that we also have to expand our definition of work and realize that what we're talking about is about regardless of what people do, because jobs will be different 20 years from now in caregiving, in art, and being a student, etc. We'll have to be considered more like jobs, and the guaranteed income is a way to help solve for that reality. I would also say in terms of, we heard discussion about some of the non-work impacts, what we saw was that those who received the guaranteed income actually became healthier. That so much of the stress and the anxiety, at least that we see in the United States, is oftentimes caused by very pernicious economic insecurity, very grappling and stifling poverty. And that when people had enough money to just pay a bill, to just make sure the roof was on their head, to just buy food, they were less stressed, less anxious, happier, and spent more time with their children. There's one gentleman in particular, Tomas, who talks about how the guaranteed income allowed him to be a better parent because he was actually able to get a better job so he didn't have to work two jobs. So yes, in the data, it would say he worked less, although I think we would all agree having one job that pays the bills is better than having two jobs that doesn't pay the bill. And in doing so, he was able to show up for his kids and realize what they like. He says, now I realize my kids like science because I'm home and I see them. And now I have income to buy them telescopes, to take them on field trips, etc. And in the States, we see sort of more momentum around this idea. I mentioned we have 100 cities testing and piloting now. And my state of California, under Governor Newsom, became the first state to initiate a guaranteed income program focused on pregnant people and foster youth. And the cash, or the announcement just went out last week, and the cash will be dispersed shortly. So I'll conclude with saying, I think beyond the importance of data, and I think I mentioned this in my opening remarks, part of the conversation we're having is a conversation of values. It's a conversation of what type of world do we want to live in. And I truly believe 100 years from now, people will look back and say, oh my gosh, it took them so long to recognize that no one should be poor, that no one should be hungry, that our societies are healthier, are safer, are more cohesive, that people are able to maximize their full potential when they have their basic needs met. So I want to thank everyone for their courage and their radical imagination, because I truly think we are building to where we need to be, and that's a society and a global community that understands that A, no one needs to earn their humanity. No one needs to earn not being hungry. No one needs to earn a baseline level of shelter over their heads, because everyone is human. So when we talk about universal basic income, we're really talking about moving our societies to an understanding of this notion of universal basic human dignity. So thank you.
Okay, 감사합니다.
So thank you very much. I know that many of you are joining us virtually online. We're going to now invite Professor Kim Won-seo from Hong Kong University.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to be with you in person, but 2 days ago I contracted COVID, and so I could not attend in person. So in 2020, when COVID-19 began, I ended my 15 years of living in the U.S. And then I went to Hong Kong, and then I received a letter from Joe Biden, and it was the first time to receive a letter from the president. And in the letter, it stated that due to the pandemic, my life might deteriorate, and therefore thousands of dollars have been sent to me. So this was the economic impact payment. So the IRS understood my income and knew my bank bank account that I used in Hong Kong. And so during the pandemic period, my income did not go down. So I did not need this subsidy. However, it led me to realize the importance of such social security policies that find people in need. And so the government is trying to identify the socially neglected, and just using the system as is trying to find a needle in a haystack. So even before one realizes that you need help, there has to be policies that go to these people before they realize that they need help. Or else we will keep on finding blind spots in our social safety net. And the reason why this situation is occurring in Korea is because there's this strict eligibility standard. And also, if you purchase a car amounting to $2,000 to get to the hospital, then you lose your eligibility. And even if you have a very poor small house, still you lose your eligibility. And therefore, 730,000 people are losing their eligibility, though they have low income. And so these people who are struggling, they have to prepare all of the paperwork, and all of this bureaucracy is really difficult for them. And also, this leads to a lot of cost associated to the services. And if you work, then this becomes a disadvantage, because if you work, then you lose your eligibility, and you have to prove that you are poor, and this becomes a mental burden too. So as an alternative social security system is the NIT, negative income tax, and UBI. And it reduces dramatically the various eligibility standards and selection process, and it does not have disincentives for work. And SSIP is a adjusted NIT. If the income per person is 1.4 million, for SSIP, the per household income would be 2.4 million. And if this is expanded to the entire nation, this will require a budget of 35 trillion. And if the 30 trillion is given out to basic, it will be $600,000 per person. So with the same budget, we can reduce the income polarization dramatically through SSIP. So we have NIT. So I am wondering why we are trying to apply BI when it costs so much. In particular, out of OECD countries, we have the highest elderly poverty rate. And my opinion, I think that applies to US, Germany, and Finland. Professor Kim, we can give you 30 more seconds. Thank you. I understand. So lastly, I would like to say that in Korea, SSIP and the basic income is still undergoing experiments. And when looking at experiments of various of these experiments, there are design biases. So if there is a treatment group and control group, even when there isn't change, they will say that there was a change, because there could be subjective well-being answers saying that there is a change. Therefore, we need to utilize various administrative data to overcome the limitations of these experiments. So I think we need to go forward with a new system, because NBLSS has lived its course.
Next, from Korea University, Professor Kim Won-seop. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kim Won-seop from Korea University. So it is a great pleasure to take part in the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income. So in all areas, Korea has been a follower of advanced countries. But if you look at today's forum, it shows us that we are no longer just a follower. If we just follow other countries, there is nothing to learn. So I think that today's forum shows us the feasibility and innovation of SSIP. But through this session today, we looked at the experiments of other countries. And if you look at the modern welfare state, it has made a lot of progress. But the welfare state provides job security, and it's based on stable family relations. But because of various issues, this stability is undermined. And so people are looking at new initiatives, new programs. And there was a lot of control and enforcement in the existing welfare systems in the past. But the new welfare systems that we are looking at don't look so much at controlling recipients, but by supplying unconditional cash incentives, they are increasing the freedom and autonomy of citizens. So I think that this SSIP or this experiment, if you look at all of the discussion so far, was based around norm. But with SSIP and a lot of the discussions that are taking place are looking about the feasibility. How can we actually implement these programs? So I think that is where we can find the meaning behind these initiatives. So we heard from Finland, Germany, US case studies. And all of these programs are not just trying to enforce the program or control the recipients. They're giving people freedom in terms of money and time so that they can enhance the quality of their life. And I think that is the goal of a lot of these experiments. So you can see that there's been a paradigm shift compared to the existing welfare programs. Despite this fact, when we compare these three countries, there are differences. If you look at Finland, in their case, they are more focused on those who are receiving unemployment benefits. So there's a lot of focus on employment, motivation, and incentive. And in the Stockton City case of the United States, they look at people with lower income. So they're looking at how to improve the social structure. And in German Berlin's experiment, I think it's a model that is closer to basic income models. So it's about unconditionally providing the income to people. So it's there's more universality to the program. So if you look at Germany's case studies, we don't have the results of the study, so we can't talk about it in detail. But if you look at the U.S. Stockton City model, in welfare discussion, I think a lot of people focus on the fact that people don't work after receiving these incentives, or they are demotivated to work, so it leads to more poverty. And I believe that the results of Stockton City tell us otherwise, so it is quite meaningful. If you look at the Stockton City, rather than relying on the welfare system, when they receive this basic income, it shows us that the recipients, their life, their work, their health all improves. So there is a lot that we can learn from. And SSIP, I think, has a lot to benchmark from the Stockton City case study. Also, if you look at the Stockton City case study, there are some similarities to SSIP. First, in terms of social assistance, that is the goal. Social assistance is the goal. So compared to the existing welfare system, there is not a lot of areas where there's a conflict with existing welfare systems. And if you look at Germany's case study, they're providing more universal basic income, but I think the Stockton City model and SSIP is more financially manageable in terms of procuring the resources. So once again, I would like to emphasize that our welfare system cannot just copy or follow other countries. We've moved beyond that stage. I think experiments like SSIP should be implemented. We have to be innovator. We have to be leader, not a follower. And I think in terms of welfare state model, we can also be a leading country. Thank you very much. So thank you. Next, Park Jung-min from Seoul National University. So guaranteeing a certain level of income to citizens, I think that is described with many words like safety income, basic income, but I will call this guaranteed income. So I like to focus on three main points. The first thing I would like to focus on is there are many different guaranteed income experiments taking place around the world. And if I can share with you, my thought is that I have high expectations, but I'm very cautious. If you look at the guaranteed, a lot of the experiments have a common factor that is guaranteed income, but in terms of the benefits, who it's targeting is different, and also the experiment method is also different. So the high expectation I have is that there are many different types of guaranteed income experiments taking place. So the outcome of guaranteed income, what sort of factors are effective in terms of guaranteed income, I believe will be proved through data, and I believe that this data will be quickly accumulated. In Korea, we don't have a lot of proof or evidence-based policies, so we're going to carry out this experiment and we'll be able to assess the policies that we implement. And as mentioned before, we have to look at the benefits provided and also research methods. So we have to be very cautious in generalizing the outcome of these studies. And the second thing I would like to mention is that we have to think about what is the objective of the guaranteed income and what it should be. And this discussion must continue on. Each program has a different goal. For Finland, they look at employment motivation or employment incentive. SSIP and the US, they look at income security, and SSIP also looks at helping recipients who are in the blind spot. All of this is very important, but not only this direct objective, but we also have to look at the long-term fundamental goal of these guaranteed income programs. So guaranteed income can enhance income security and also address welfare blind spots. But at the same time, it might help citizens to live a life that they believe is worthy, and it will give them more room and give them more liberty and freedom. So that, I believe, should be more reflected in the various guaranteed income programs. And the reason why I mention this is because if you have clear objectives in place, then it is easier to assess the performance of that program. And it is also closely connected to measuring the outcomes of that program. In Finland, it said that employment motivation is low and subjective well-being is high. That was the meaningful result that was derived. But I think that taking a more comprehensive view, we have to look at the impact on quality of life, including subjective well-being. So these are some of the indicators that we also need to look at moving forward. And the guaranteed income should not stop at being a new experiment. It should bring about disruptive innovation and change. And many scholars talk about the strength of guaranteed income, and one of those is that it helps to supplement the existing Social Security program in terms of means test. Those that sort of bring discrimination can be addressed as well. So whether you're for or against a guaranteed income, we should look at these factors. And as we implement guaranteed income program and expand the program, I think all of these things should be considered. So guaranteed income should not be just an experiment. We have to increase the impact. At the same time, we have to reduce duplicity or inefficiency, and we should try to make a more just and equitable program. So I hope the guaranteed income projects will become disruptive innovators, and I believe that the case studies we heard from the different countries have the potential to do that. So thank you very much. Mayor always joining us, and we have many prominent experts from abroad joining us, but it seems that we are running out of time, but so many people have joined us. So we will take one question from the floor because so many people have joined us.
혹시 질문을 꼭 해야 되겠다 하시는 분 계신가요?
If you have any questions.
시간이 많이 돼가지고 지금 뭐 휴식 시간을 전부 기다리고
So we are actually past the scheduled time. We were not able to have a discussion with the participants. However, we were able to hear remarks from speakers who have carried out important experiments around the world and also renowned discussants. And through this discussion, I'm sure that we can design a social security system that reduces blind spots and that can lead to a more sustainable system. There is one pressing question, so we will entertain one question from the floor. Hello. Hello, everyone. I am a social worker in Seoul, and I am Chung Sang, and I work with many national basic livelihood security recipients. And I heard from them that they want to experience SSIP in other regions too. So is there a possibility in which the safety income project can be expanded to other cities nationwide? And is there a way to expedite this? And many NBLSS recipients have asked this question. Also, those who are receiving NBLSS in Seoul is 910,000, and the SSIP is 820,000. So there is a difference of 90,000. And for those who receive the NBLSS, the gap is filled by the Seoul government. But for those who are not receiving the NBLSS yet, but that will be receiving this in the future, can the city government fill in this gap? It's a very difficult question, so we will be hearing from our mayor. Thank you for the great question. So this SSIP started in Seoul, and so the question, the first one, was about whether this can be expanded to other cities and other regions. But that is a question that is beyond my scope. So we plan to carry this out 2 to 3 years, and after the first and second year of the project, we will have 8 regular interim reviews of the results of the experiment. And as we accumulate the results, after 2 to 3 intermediate results come out, we may be able to get a social consensus that this experiment requires more diverse experiments, and in that case, similar experiments can be carried out in other regions too, for us to get the most data and information as possible. And if the experts help us out, then it could be carried out in Busan, Daegu, and Gwangju, and other cities in Korea. And so that is a thought that came to mind. And more urgently, I hope that the central government takes this over for them to carry out a nationwide program, and then we can get more accurate data about the experiment. And there are many participants who are participating, and you have a lot of interest in this area. And through your active interest and participation, we may be able to see this day come forward sooner than later. And such experiments, if you agree that this helps in overcoming the limitations to our current welfare system, I hope that you can combine your opinions with us and to join forces with us. Do you agree? Yes. And on the second question, yes, I recall that those issues were pointed out, and even before we started the SSIP, we identified those gaps, and that is why for those gaps that have been identified, the income gap is being filled in as we are implementing this project. And I think that the actual people who have designed the system, such as Professor Ki-sung Park and our welfare department head knows about this better than I do. So they, I think, will be able to answer that question. I understand that that gap has been filled, though. Thank you.
감사합니다.
So thank you very much. With this, we will conclude the panel discussion for session 1. Once again, thank you for your active interest and participation. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please give our moderator and panel discussants another big round of applause. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude session 1. Once again, we would like to thank the presenters, discussants, and moderators for their contribution. We are going to take a 10-minute break, and then we will resume the next part of our program. For those of us joining us on YouTube, if you could just keep your channel open, we will see you back here in 10 minutes.
네, 잠시 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 잠시 후에 저희 다시 세션을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 장내에 계신 분들께서는 모두 착석 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 다시 한번 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 이제 잠시 후 두 번째 세션을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 장내에 계신 분들께서는 모두 자리에 착석 부탁드리겠습니다. 고맙습니다. 네, 이제 저희 다시 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 즐거운 휴식 시간 되셨나요?
So we're going to resume our program. I hope everyone enjoyed the break. And so we're now going to begin session 2. But before we begin session 2, we have a special speech by Professor Robert Moffitt, and he's going to talk about the welfare program for the poor. And he is a professor of economics at Johns Hopkins University. So why don't we hear his special speech first?
Good morning. My name is Robert Moffitt. I'm a Krieger Eisenhower Professor of Economics with a joint appointment in our School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, in the USA. You can see from my background here, it's a beautiful campus. I've been here about 25 years, and I've enjoyed the campus and the faculty here. It's an outstanding institution, and I'm happy to say we have many faculty and excellent graduate students from Korea, and I've learned a great deal about Korea from my colleagues and from my students. So I'm very happy to be here and to talk today to the Seoul National Forum on Safety Income in 2022, and particularly about the Seoul Safety Income program, very exciting program. And I'm going to talk to you about my views on the negative income tax, on programs which share some similarities to the SSIP, the Seoul Safety Income program in Korea. And I'll talk to you about a lot of US evidence. I should say I know evidence from many other countries, but my best expertise is the US. So I'll spend my time, limited time, talking about that. So I have a number of slides, and I'm going to go through them briefly, and I have some little time for discussion questions at the end. So let me share my screen, share my slides, and let us begin. And again, I'd like to thank the Seoul Metropolitan Government, and in particular, Mr. Si-Hoon Oh, the mayor, for inviting me. The guaranteed income and the Seoul Safety Income program. I talk about U.S. evidence and what some of the issues I see are with the SSIP. And let me share my screen here, not so you don't see everything else. Okay. So the introduction here, guaranteed income I think we have a number of experts on guaranteed income. I saw on the agenda, so I don't need to spend time talking about the long history. It actually goes back many centuries. The United States has only been seriously proposed about 50 years ago, but it's been talked about a long time. However, the popularity has grown and fallen, and recently it's gained a lot of interest in the United States and around the world, renewed interest. So it's a very exciting time to be discussing the program. So I'm going to talk about 4 different things in my talk here. I'm going to talk about the benefits and costs of the guaranteed income, and I'll talk about those benefits and costs, what evidence we have in the U.S. on a guaranteed income, and I'll talk about the economics of the guaranteed income with a particular focus on work incentive issue, which I've done a lot of work on, and is perhaps the most well-known issue in the general public and in policymaker circles with a guaranteed annual income. The United States evidence on work incentives, I'll present what I view to be the best evidence on that issue. And then I'll say a few things about the Seoul Safety Income program and issues that I see with it and how it fits into the larger set of evidence. Well, benefits and costs, the SSIP is a form of a negative income tax, which means that it guarantees a certain amount of income to all families who are eligible and who participate. And then it phases it out at a fairly low income level. The SSIP phase out fairly low, not about 85% of the median income in Korea. That's not low, but it's not as high as it could be either. I'm sure some people would like it to be higher. But typically the negative income tax does not go that high up into the income distribution. And that's one of its chief characteristics. I'm not going to talk specifically about the UBI. I think we have some other people here in the forum who will be talking about that. But the NIT and the UBI share this one similar feature, which is that they both guarantee an income to everyone who's eligible for the program who participates. So guaranteeing that floor, making sure that no one falls below that floor is the key characteristic of both programs, both the NIT and the UBI. So what are the benefits? Well, the benefits are well known, and I'll talk about the evidence for a minute, but just to list some of the evidence, if you've read anything about the lives of low-income families and disadvantaged families, you know they struggle day to day to quote unquote make ends meet, to have enough income to manage their lives successfully and afford the basic standards of living, of food, clothing, housing, and other necessities of life, the basic necessities. They struggle with that. And they don't have enough to really buy that minimum. If you give them more income, they will certainly be able to use that income in a number of ways. The adults and the children will have more income. Poverty rates will fall. Another benefit of extra income, is it'll smooth out unstable income paths. When they lose a job, they'll have some income to fall back on. Or if they have a sudden expense, like they have an automobile and the automobile breaks down, they have to pay for repairs, they will have the money to do that. So it helps them reduce their instability in their lives. It also might improve their health. We know that poverty makes health worse through nutrition effects, healthcare, and many other environmental concerns. And also it has a long-run impact if that money affords low-income families the ability to pursue higher levels of education, or to pay for training programs, or to move to places where there are better jobs, many different benefits. They will have long-run impacts, and it might have long-run impacts on the children. We know that children who grow up in poverty have worse outcomes in the future than kids who don't, and that will be another benefit. As I said, I'll talk about the evidence for these in a minute. I do want to emphasize the insurance angle, that programs for a guaranteed income benefit not just those who are poor right now, but benefits those who are not poor right now, but might lose their job and fall into poverty. Those families will be temporarily poor, and a guaranteed income has the possibility of helping those families out on a short-term basis. However, there is one feature that you need for a program for that benefit to occur. That is that the program has to be very well suited to enroll people quickly and give them some money temporarily for a few months or a few weeks. And a lot of programs have a difficulty acting that quickly, but that's necessary if you want to have the benefits of insurance to a guaranteed income. So what are some U.S. evidence on the benefits? We have a lot of evidence from our different programs. I should emphasize the U.S. does not have a guaranteed income. We have a lot of programs of different types which provide different kind of benefits. We do have only one program that everyone is eligible for, and that's our food stamp program, and families who are low income of all types, married, unmarried, whether they have children or not, whether they're older or young, it doesn't matter. Everyone is eligible for that. So that's the one we have. But the other programs we have for medical care, almost everyone, and for the older population and the disabled population, we almost have a guaranteed income, but not quite. And we have a lot of other programs, but not guaranteeing for everyone. Their eligibility is often limited. The evidence is that, first of all, our programs taken together almost reduced poverty rates by 50%, almost by one half, which is millions of families. So it's having a tremendous impact in the United States. We also had quite a bit of evidence for some field experiments back in the 1970s, and those gave more evidence of benefits. Housing expenditures increased, home ownership went up, education levels went up, and children did better in school. Their test scores did better if they received the guaranteed income back in those experiments. It can reduce parental distress. Mental health is very important. And you can imagine that parents are very stressed when they can't afford the right expenditures for their children. Guaranteed income has been shown to reduce parental distress. Our food stamp program has tremendous effects on health, both for adults and children. And that program also reduces the instability of family income. It can act fairly quickly. You can get food stamps pretty quickly if you lose your job in a very short period of time. We have many, many other studies, and I could spend my whole time talking about all the studies that have been done in the United States. But there's overwhelming evidence that there are tremendous benefits to guaranteed income. There's also a cost side, and I don't mean the cost that I'm talking about monetarily, but the poverty has a cost. There have been estimates in the United States of how much GDP is reduced by poverty, by families who aren't as productive as they could be. The jobs are low-wage jobs because they don't have the skills to be productive members of the labor force. And also the fact that they often receive welfare benefits that they wouldn't have if they were able to escape poverty. It's been estimated that GDP in the United States is 4% lower than it could be if we didn't have the same poverty rates we have. So that should be kept in mind as well. Like Korea, the U.S. does have some holes in our safety net. We don't have guaranteed income, as I said. And so we do have a number of families that are in very deep poverty. About 3%, 3.3% of the population are very, very poor. Back in the pandemic in 2021, Congress did pass a child tax credit. It was called basically a guaranteed income for families with children. Unfortunately, that expired, although Congress now is trying to reinstate it. We also issued a report from our U.S. National Academy of Sciences in 2019, which did a lot of calculations, which showed that if you had a guaranteed income, which we don't have in the United States, but if you filled in all the holes and you supplemented the program sufficiently, we could reduce poverty by 50% from where it is right now, even on top of our current reductions. And so there's a great potential here, which remains to be fully exploited. The cost, well, obviously the financial cost is a large one. The U.S. spends about 14% of its budget, the federal government budget, on safety net programs, and even more than that, almost half of the budget, if you count our old age Social Security program, pensions for the elderly, and also programs for the disabled. That's a very large amount. So we're not talking about small amounts of money here. Cost is a serious issue, and it has to be balanced to get all the other needs of society. The indirect costs are possibly decreases in work, possibly decreases in the desire to get a higher level of education, and I'll talk more about those in a second. And what about the economics? Okay, the economics is familiar to any economist. I know there are some in the audience here. And the economics of a guaranteed income is expressed by this formula, where G is the amount you guaranteed. If you have no money whatsoever, E is earnings, and if you have no earnings, G is the amount you'll get. And then as your earnings go up, as the letter there, E, goes up, benefits are reduced by the rate little t. T is the benefit reduction rate. Some people call it the tax rate, and that is at 50% in the Seoul Safety Income program. So total income is the sum of the benefits and the earnings. And this is a familiar diagram to those of you like me who worked for years in this area. And it shows on the horizontal axis how much earnings a family will have, and on the vertical axis, Y is their total income. If they have zero earnings, they will get the G. G is their maximum amount of income. And as they work more, as their earnings go up, the benefit will fall. B is that vertical distance. You can see it'll get smaller and smaller as E goes up, and eventually the vertical dotted line there shows the level of earnings where the benefit will fall to zero, and the family will no longer be eligible for the program. Now, the message of this diagram is, number one, most benefits go to the lower income families. More benefits are channeled down to the poorest families. And that's a feature which most programs want to try to do, not a UBI, but all negative income tax programs try to furnish more money to people with the lowest incomes. Sometimes that's called target efficiency, targeting benefits on the poorest families and giving somewhat higher income families somewhat less. So that's the feature. Now, you might say, well, why not give a little bit more income to benefits to the people higher up by lowering that reduction rate? And this is what would happen. If you lowered that little t, then you'd get the new dotted line. And that would, in fact, not phase out the benefits so quickly. And therefore, more people would receive benefits higher up. The cost side of that is that more people will be eligible for the program. And on the horizontal axis, I've shown the range of earnings which will now become eligible for the program. This is called the iron triangle problem, which is just a trade-off between the guarantee level, the minimum, the benefit the maximum benefit for the minimum income you'll receive, the little t, and the cost. You'd like to have a high G. You'd always want to furnish a good standard of living to people who have no income whatsoever. You want to keep little t low, not only because you don't want to phase it out so fast and you want to give higher income families some money, but you also want to encourage work incentives. And yet when you do that, if you keep the G very high and the T very low, it's going to be a very, very costly program. So you have to weigh these things against one another, and there's really no solution to this problem. You have to balance those different factors, the G, the T, and the cost, and decide where you are comfortable. Society has to decide that. The government has to decide that. And the people of this country have to decide where they want to locate that balance. I have a note here on multiple programs. Anytime you put a new program on top of many others, you have to be very careful because the existing programs already have tax rate in them. And if these programs interact, you will have some additional offsetting effects which may not be immediately apparent. I'm not going to go through these equations, but they're in my slides if anyone wants to look at them. Now, what's the evidence on work incentives from the United States? The best ones we have are from those field experiments, negative income tax experiments we had in the 1970s. And there you see that they did show some reductions in hours of work. Their main measure they used, and it shows the reductions right there. More for wives than for husbands. More wives who are on the borderline of working and not working, and they reduced their work more. There's some controversy about whether these are too large or too small. There were a lot of issues in the design and analysis of those experiments, and I won't take the time to go into those. Simply say these are the estimates, and you can read the studies on this to decide whether you think they're overstatements or not. We have evidence from our other programs. Our food stamp program seems to have really no effects on work, and nor does Medicaid. But our housing programs, a very good natural experiment study was done a few years ago, which randomly assigned people to housing programs and did show a minus 11% reduction in earnings. One of the features that comes out from all these studies is that while the work disincentives are not zero, okay, there are some work disincentives on average. The biggest ones are for women with children. And that's because a lot of women, which particularly young children, would like to spend more time at home. And if you allow them to do that, then they will spend more time with their children. If they're poor and you don't have any support forever, they have to work, even if the child care is not very good. But just to keep the family income, they have to work, even though they would like not to. So that's one of the big effects that comes from the program. And a lot of people would say it's not terrible that mothers with young children would actually prefer to spend more time at home. What about the SSIP? Like a lot of our programs, which are, so we don't have a safety net that fills in all the holes. It's intended to fill in the holes that are not covered by other programs. You have your NBLSS, which has very restrictive eligibility conditions and a very low eligibility level for income. If you go down to the very poorest of the poor, I saw one statistic which said that only about 41% of the poorest families in Korea, lowest incomes, lowest assets, only 41% of them are getting benefits of that program. And people with more income and more assets are getting even much less. So there are a lot of people not getting that benefit. The SSIP will go to those people with low incomes who aren't eligible or aren't participating in the NBLSS. The SSIP also has a much higher eligibility level, so it will also cover more higher income families. So it will cover both, more lower income families and more higher income families. So that's going to have many benefits to up and down the income distribution. The interaction with other programs are very complex. You're not going to be eligible if you're receiving the NBLSS. Some other programs are taxed at 100%. You do have an earned income tax credit, which has its own tax rate. My one recommendation for the evaluation team here, because of the complexity of the overlap with other programs, I suggest the team consider constructing a simulation model and actually compute what they expect the total benefits and the total benefit reduction rates for different families will be. So in summary, I think it's fair to say that the evidence is overwhelming that the guaranteed income programs will have positive effects on well-being, education, health, adults, children, up and down the line, tremendous benefits. The work incentives are mixed, but I believe the work incentives are non-zero. But people may differ on that. And why that matters is it'll affect your choice of the G and the T. If you think work incentives are very modest and really not an important issue, then you should probably set a very high guarantee level and a very high T, a benefit reduction rate. You might as well concentrate all your money on the very low income families and phase it out very quickly, set a very high G to cover all those people with no other income, and then just have a very high tax rate. But if you think that work incentives are a serious issue, some that you really have to pay attention to, you should keep that tax rate low. And unless you don't want to spend a lot more money, that might mean reducing the G too. So that's where the work incentives comes in, and you have to make your own decision about how important you think they are, and set your G and T accordingly. The SSIP, as I see it, is a very promising program, and I look forward to seeing the results of the evaluation. So now let me spend just a minute here answering some questions you might ask about this area. One, could a guaranteed income be one of the solutions to address economic and social inequality? And definitely, no question about it. It would reduce poverty by large amounts, and that would close the gap between higher income families and lower income families. It might also have very beneficial effects on education, which would raise the earnings of the families who receive it. Secondly, has that movement influenced the welfare and security policy, Social Security policy in the United States? Well, I just described, we don't have a guaranteed income right now, but the movement is here and it's very prominent. It did succeed, as I said, in passing a guaranteed income for children in 2021. It did expire, but there are many efforts to reintroduce it in U.S. Congress right now, and the movement is very strong. However, there's a very strong movement among the mayors in the United States, and many cities right now are testing and pilot guaranteed income, and they're usually using proper evaluation methods, and there's going to be a lot of good evidence coming out right now at the local level, the city level. Finally, what would my recommendation for successful implementation? What are the key elements? First of all, there's nothing like calculating exactly what the benefit levels are going to be, what the tax rate is going to be in cost in advance. You don't want to be surprised by this. And I know a lot of calculations have been made already, but I think being prepared for the results is the best way you can guide the design. I know the design's been made, but there are many questions remaining. The one last point I want to make, when I'll close here, is whether a different point I have not made yet, which is that there's a lot of evidence here in the United States that you really need to help low-income families with their problems, with personal assistance, counseling, and helping them understand their situation. And that just doesn't mean just giving them a program and sitting back and waiting for them to understand it. They're not going to understand. Many people don't understand it. They can't navigate it. So they need personal assistance, and you need a government agency that is out there providing information, helping families understand the program, helping them enroll in it. So it's a point I have not made before, but I want to emphasize that that's a key element to the success of any new government program. So let me stop there. I want to thank you all again for asking me to talk. I hope I could be there in person. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I know the discussion was very good, very excellent. And I look forward to hearing more reports of the discussion at the conference and more about the future of the SSIP as it progresses. Thank you for inviting me. Good night.
네, 로버트 모핏 교수님의 말씀 잘 들었습니다.
Thank you, Professor Robert Moffat.
토론 질문까지 답변을 해주셔서
So he provided a presentation and also some questions for the discussion. So we will now go on to session 2. It will be on introduction of the Seoul Safety Income Project. The discussants are kindly asked to come up to the stage and to take their seats. Moderator, discussants, and presenters, please come up to the stage.
네, 준비를 하시는 동안에는 제가 참여하시는 분들을
As you are we setting up the stage? I would like to introduce our moderator, Professor Jong Sung-yoon. He is the guest professor at Gachon College of Liberal Arts and Science at Gachon University. Next, the presenters. First, we have Park Ki-sung, who will be presenting on the costs and effects of safety income in Seoul, South Korea, Professor of Economics at Seongshin University. And he was the president of the Korea Labor Institute. And next, we will be hearing from Professor Dr. Kim Sang-chul, president of the Seoul Welfare Foundation. He is going to be presenting on the overview of the Seoul Safety Income Project and results of the baseline survey. I will now introduce our discussants. The first discussant was the professor, was actually the presenter for the first session, Professor Hiki Hilamo, Professor of Social Policy, University of Helsinki. And the professor recently wrote a book called Participatory Income. Next, we have Dr. Ho Young-oh, Senior Research Fellow at the Korea Research Institute for Vocational Education and Training. And Dr. Oh has worked on guidance, career guidance for the labor vulnerable class, such as the youth. Next, we have Sundor Chung, and she's a professor at Ewha Women's University, Department of Social Welfare. And we have Kyung-jun Ho, Song, professor at the Social Policy Department of Social Welfare at Sungkyunkwan University, and is an advisor to the 41st President of Korea Academy of Welfare. Then we will begin session 2. And I will now hand over the microphone to our moderator, Professor Jong Sung-yu. During the discussion, you may take off your masks.
So I am Yoo Jung-sung from Gachon University. So we have Professor Park Ki-sung, who created SSIP. So he will deliver a presentation for 20 minutes. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon and welcome to this historic convention discussing the grand vision to change, I believe, the whole welfare system in this country and possibly all around the world. It's my honor and pleasure to present our paper titled The Cost and Economic Effects of Safety Income in South Korea to the precious guests participating in this memorable international forum. This paper was written by myself and two other scholars, Dr. Cho at Kerry and Professor Kim at Kookmin University. Now I'd like to introduce the basic welfare system in South Korea, the National Basic Livelihood Security System, so-called NBLSS. NBLSS has been known to play the role of basic welfare quite effectively since 2000, but it has two major problems. One problem is that it has created a large blind zone where many people still remain unprotected. In 2014, for example, a mother and her two adult daughters in Songpa-gu, a district in Seoul, committed suicide due to their extreme financial difficulties. Despite the government's significant effort to reduce this kind of unfortunate incidents, suicide family in extreme economic conditions have occurred consistently. Recently this year, a mother and her two adult daughters committed suicide again in Suwon, a city in the south of Seoul, turning to be a complete deja vu of the 2014 tragedy. Theoretically, approximately 15% of all households should be covered by the livelihood benefit, one of 7 benefits of NBLSS. In reality, however, only 4.6% of all households receive it. Why does it happen? That's because the government imposes various strict restrictions on the eligibility for NBLSS. Another problem is that NBLSS has a low work incentive. The situation in 2019 is captured in this figure. As you can see, the blank line is the wage line. The labor income increases according to working hours, and the slope shows the wage rate. The purple lines indicate the livelihood and housing benefits. The green lines are the earned income tax credit, EITC. Even if an individual is able to work, he or she will choose point A. Why is it so? That's because its reservation wage rate is higher than 37% of its market wage rate. If so, there's no labor supply. The 37% is EITC rate at the starting point. What is safety income? Let's take a look at figure 1. Figure 1 shows the basic structure of safety income following the principle of thick bottom, thin top. If a household earns less than the standard median income, which is 60 million won a year, household received SI support. The SI support is 50% of the difference between the standard medium income and household current income. As you can see, the current income is dotted line in this figure. The SI support is represented as the orange triangle and disposable income, the orange solid line. However, household earning more than the standard medium income cannot receive SI. If SI replaces livelihood and housing benefits based on 2019 data, we have figure 2. As you can see, the red line is SI support. The household choice would move to B instead of A, where it supplies labor. The amount of labor is CE. When it occurs, disposable income increases from AC to BE. Its utility increases from U0 to U1, but the amount of government payment to the household decreases from AC to BD. Now, I'd like to point out that SI is quite different from negative income tax, NIT. Although the safety income may look similar to the negative income tax, as in figure 1, we argue that SI is different from NIT in the following 3 respects. Number 1, while NIT abolished all current welfare benefits, SI maintains almost all of them. Number 2, while NIT was suggested with a flat tax rate on income without tax deduction or exemption by Friedman, SI maintains the current tax system with various forms of tax deductions and exemptions. Number 3, while NIT suggested by Friedman covers only the lowest 10% of household, SI covers as much as the lowest 50% of household. In South Korea, income tax is withheld monthly and settled at the end of the year. In the same way, the amount of SI support is determined only by the amount, the income of each household, and is paid in advance and adjusted afterward. SI follows the principle of support forward, settle afterward. Therefore, SI is more likely to prevent suicide due to economic hardship than the current NBLSS. In 2022, Seoul Metropolitan Government started the pilot project of SI, so-called SSIP, adopting the SI's philosophy and welfare policy implications. As you can see, table A1, SSIP is a little bit different from our original SI. First, whereas SI covers the entire nation, SSIP covers the Seoul area. Second, while all households below the standard medium income are eligible for SI, households below 85% of standard medium income, and that's very important, and below the net asset value of 326 million won are eligible for SSIP. Third, benefits replaced by SI and by SSIP are different. You can find the detailed differences in table A1. First, in SI, the standard medium income of the N-member household is determined to be that of 4-member household divided by 4 and then multiplied it by N. On the contrary, SSIP uses the standard medium income of each N-member household. According to the SSIP rules, the standard medium income of a single-member household is almost 40% of that of 4-member household. Now we turn to table 2. Table 2 shows SI support by income bracket and household members. We use the 2019 Korea Welfare Panel KWP data. Table 3 shows the numbers of households eligible for SI support. And table 4 shows the percentages of households eligible for SI support by income bracket and household members. Based on tables 2 to 4, we estimated the additional budget for implementing SI in 2019. It is estimated as 29.7 trillion won. But if the same amount of budget as 29.7 trillion won were used for Universal Basic Income, UBI, as you can see, table 5 shows UBI support by income bracket and household members. You can make sure the same number, table 5, please table 5. Yeah. You can make sure the same number, 29.7 trillion won, in the rightmost, bottommost cell. Okay? But if the same amount of budget as 29.7 trillion won were used for expanding the current cash welfare benefits. Let's take a look at figure 6. Table 6. Okay? Table 6 shows the amount of support when expanding the current cash welfare benefits. You can make sure the same number, 29.7 trillion won, here again, in the rightmost and the bottommost cell. Okay, thank you. By using the computable general equilibrium, CGE model, we compared economic effects of the three welfare systems. As you can see, the Gini coefficient in table 9, SI is superior to the two welfare systems. SI reduces income differential 6 times more than UBI and 3 times more than expanding the current cash welfare benefits. Table 9 also shows the income quintile ratios of three welfare systems. SI reduces income differential 7 times more than UBI and 5 times more than the expanding current cash welfare benefits. Table 11 shows the estimate effect of SI, UBI, and expanding the current cash welfare benefits on the unemployment rate. Table 12 shows the estimate effect of SI, UBI, and expansion of the current cash welfare benefits on GDP. Now, we can interpret the estimate effect of the three welfare systems on the unemployment rate and GDP. If the current cash welfare benefits are replaced with SI as much as 29.7 trillion won, the unemployment rate decreases by 0.27 percentage point and GDP increases by 0.25%. If the current cash welfare benefits are replaced with UBI as much as 29.7 trillion won, the unemployment rate is unchanged and GDP decreases by 0.05%. Therefore, we can conclude that SI is superior to the other two welfare systems in all four economic performance measures, such as Gini coefficient, income quintile ratio, and unemployment rate and GDP. Well, I'd like to summarize our arguments. As you know, everyone in our society can fall into an economic hardship. When it happens, SI can play as a reliable support for a family to maintain a certain standard of living. Anyone can attempt a risky business or a venture unless a family's living is threatened by failing the business. Since such an effort is the driving force of the market economy, SI would promote the economic growth. In this sense, SI should be viewed as both an economic system and a welfare system. Once again, I'd like to mention SI is superior to UBI and the current cash welfare benefits in all aspects. It's about time to wrap up my presentation. I hope it will help you understand what SI is all about and how it works. Thank you so much for your listening. Thank you again.
So we heard about SSIP, and we heard from Professor Park Ki-sung, who actually wrote a paper about the safety income, and he was very time efficient. I think he has 5 minutes left. So the theory of SSIP was founded by Professor Park Ki-sung. And now, the person who actually designed the safety income project in Seoul City and the person who will be responsible for assessing the outcome of SSIP will be carried out by Seoul Welfare Foundation. And now I would like to invite the president of Seoul Welfare Foundation, Mr. Kim Sang-chul, to share with us more about SSIP. So the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kim Sang-chul. I am the president of Seoul Welfare Foundation. I would like to first say that it is a great honor to deliver a presentation about SSIP, which is the first of its kind in terms of a welfare system. So today I'm going to talk about the overview of the SSIP and results of the baseline survey, and here is the outline of my presentation. First, I'm going to introduce SSIP briefly, and then I'm going to talk about the implementation of SSIP, and then I will talk about the research design of SSIP, as well as the baseline survey plan and results. And I'm also going to talk about the categorization and characteristics of SSIP treatment group. And last but not least, I will talk about the future plan of SSIP. So SSIP randomly selected 500 households whose income is at or below 50% of the standard median income and whose asset value does not exceed 326 million Korean won. So the randomly sampled according to the statistical criteria designed to ensure that the group accurately represents the households of diverse size and ages. And so we have 500 households, and then the control group we have 1,000 households. So in recruiting the participation for SSIP, 33,000 households applied, and then we selected treatment group. And from July of this year, they are receiving the payroll. For the control group, it's 1,030 households, and they don't receive the safety income, but they will take part in the interim review and investigation. So the research design of SSIP, we have a treatment group, and then through pre and post, there will be pre and post research, and then also we have treatment group and control group, and then every 6 months, for all of the households that are participating, we will carry out an interim research. And after the project concludes, we will carry out ex-post analysis. And after 1 year, we will also carry up a follow-up phase. From 2022 to 2025, for 3 consecutive years, we will provide SSIP. And the research will be carried out for 5 years until 2026, because we will be continuing to observing the participating households. In order to find out the income of these participating households, there are 7 sectors that we look at. First is work and employment. Second is financial conditions and outcomes, education and training, housing, health, family and social relationship, as well as life satisfaction. And there are 150 questions. So with these 150 questions, we are able to understand the different characteristics and changes of the participating households. Here is the result of the baseline survey. So it is based on the features of the household. So if you look at male and female, you can compare the treatment group and control group, and you can see that the majority of households is led by a female. And you can see that for the treatment group, it's 54 years, and for control group, it's 50.2 years. And treatment group and control group number of household members is 2. And you can see that in terms of education level for treatment group and control group, it is similar. So here, through these numbers or these indicators, you can see that there is a lot of similarity between treatment group and control group. And now I would like to delve into each of the different categories. The first category is work and employment. So for treatment group, it was 48.1%, and for control group, 45% had a job. And you can see that for both groups, they worked for more than 40 hours a week. If you look at for the households that did not have a job, they talked about how their business was not doing well, or that they had temporary illness and accident. So you can see that business not doing well was 44.3%, temporary illness and accident was 26.2%. And for those who were doing job searching, for treatment group, it was 18.8%, and for control group, it was 20.1%. Next, we look at the financial status. And so for treatment group, it's 1.39 million won. For control group, it was 1.46 million. And you can see monthly expenditure was 1.75 million won for treatment group, and for 1.66 million for control group. So if you look at for debts, you can see that for treatment group, it was 50.8%, and for control group, it was 60.2%. So it was a little bit higher for the control group. So here you can also see property and debt, 84.85 million for treatment group, and control group, 82.56 million won. And for debt, it's 73.21 million won for treatment group, and 67.78 million for control group. For housing, you can see the majority of participants were paying monthly rent. And they felt that they felt that heating and cooling cost was quite alarming. And you can see that of the respondents, about 12% lived in basement or semi-basement housing, so they were living in non-residential buildings. And 52 households, about 3.4%, were living in non-residential buildings. And next is health and life, and you can see subjective assessment of physical condition. You can say that those that said low was for treatment group 52.1% and control group 53.5%. So majority of them actually had chronic disease, and majority of them felt that they were not in a good physical condition. And you can see the morbidity rate was relatively high. And in terms of happiness, you can see that there is higher percentage of people who felt dissatisfied with their lives. And we try to categorize the different households. So we look at work and income. So the median income was 30%. And so we looked at absolute poverty and relative poverty, and the criteria was 30% of standard median income. And we were able to derive 4 groups. So those who were absolute poverty and work, and those who had relative poverty and work, there were the main groups. And so also we can divide it with young household and middle and old age household. And what we found was that we also saw if they had spouses or not. And so for the absolute poverty and no work, we saw that there were middle and old age households and had high risk of poverty because of dual risk, which is no work and poor health. And then next we look at income and net asset and looked at the different groups. I think the group that we're most interested in is those in the absolute poverty and negative net asset, as well as relative poverty and negative net asset. For the absolute poverty and negative net asset, there are young age householders with financial vulnerability, and in this group, we saw that there was more debt than asset. There was low motivation to work, and they were financially very vulnerable because a lot of them had temporary employment. If you look at relative poverty and negative net asset, there were middle-aged householders having a high risk of poverty entry. So in this group, they had a lot of jobs, but they were self-employed, and a lot of them did not actually own homes. So now we looked at income and social isolation, and there are 4 different categories, and the key groups here are the absolute poverty and low isolation level, and absolute poverty and high isolation level. So these 2 groups. So in the absolute poverty and low isolation level, there are non-working young and middle-aged householders having risk of social isolation. And in this group, they were not working, so they were economically very vulnerable. And because they were aging, there was the possibility that there would be more social isolation. For absolute poverty and high isolation level, we felt that they were facing multidimensional risk, and they were middle-aged householders. So there were economic and health factors that were having a detrimental impact on their level of economic stability, meaning that they were more prone to poverty. Next, we looked at income and plan, and we categorized the participants. There are 4 categories: and absolute poverty and having a new plan, absolute poverty and not having a new plan. So these 2 groups are groups that we are interested in. So in the absolute poverty and having a new plan group, there are young-age householders who have the possibility of moving out of poverty. In this phase, they don't work a lot, but they are very active in searching for jobs. And so in this young-age householders, I believe that safety income will provide them with a new opportunity and also help them to take part in the labor market. Next is the absolute poverty and not having a new plan group. And these are middle and old-age householders with a high risk of persistent poverty. You can see that they don't really look for jobs, and also the employment rate is also low. Next, we look at income and health, and we categorize the participants. So we have absolute poverty, having poor health, and relatively poverty and having poor health family. So for absolute poverty and having poor health family and relative poverty and having poor health family, these are the 2 groups that we would like to focus on. In the absolute poverty and having poor health family group, there are old-age householders with a high risk of persistent poverty because of health problems. In this group, they don't have high employment, they have high medical bills. In the relative poverty and having poor health family, because of health, there is the possibility that they will enter into poverty, and they are middle-aged householders. They have a low level of depression, and they are working, but because of their health issues, their income might go down, and this will push them into poverty. So if they get safety income, they will be able to address the issue that they are facing right now in terms of health and economic stability. Next is the future plan of SSIP. So initially, we were looking at households whose income was at or below 50% of the standard median income, or 30 households whose income is between 50% and 85% of the standard median income. But in the future, we will add 500 households with 50% of the at or below 50% of the standard median income. So we will provide safety income to 1,600 households, and also the control group will be expanded, and it will include 3,200 households. So through this research, the results that we derive can be generalized if we have more households participating in SSIP. So for the smooth operation of SSIP and to derive quality research results, Seoul Metropolitan City will do its best. So we look forward to your active interest and support. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, President Kim, for your presentation. He provided an overview of the SSIP and results of the baseline survey. So we will go on to the discussion, and the first discussant is Professor Heikki Hillemo, the first presenter of the first session, and three other discussants.
Hello.
Professor Hillemo?
Good to see you. So
thank you for excellent presentations, and I'm very impressed by this project for two reasons. One is that this is really a unique approach to guaranteed minimum income. As was discussed in the first presentation, this is something different from a negative income tax. It's different from universal basic income, and it's also different from just expansion of the current system. So this is something new, and then since this is a new idea, it's very interesting that you are carrying out a pilot on that idea. I think that universal basic income is a very strong political idea, but it's not very pragmatic. So it hasn't been implemented anywhere else. Well, we can discuss whether there is universal basic income in Alaska or in Iran, but those are quite marginal projects. So what we need to think about is to have a more practical approach to guaranteeing minimum income for low-income households, and safety income is definitely a new idea. So you have this idea, and now you're also testing the idea through this pilot. And I'm also very impressed by the research design of the pilot, and the fact that you are having so many different measures of success. You're not just looking at employment, you're also looking at health, housing conditions, subjective well-being, sense of isolation, satisfaction with life. So a number of different outcomes, and it's very important to look at the subjective outcomes in addition to those kind of hard economic measures as income. Well, my only concern with the project is, or the pilot is, that the experiment group is fairly small, just 500 households on two different income levels, and that's a small concern. So it might not be possible to have statistically significant results for subgroups among those in the treatment group. But overall, I'm very much looking forward to see the results, and I agree with the professor's presentation that this is a unique idea which has international interest. So I'm sure there will be international attention to the results from this pilot, and I congratulate you for a very interesting project, and I wish you all the success in completing the pilot. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Heikki Hillemo, for brief discussion. Now we'll move to Korean discussants.
So after the Korean discussant, for those of you who are joining us here at the venue and joining us virtually, you also have an opportunity to ask questions. And if you are watching us via YouTube, please leave us your question. Then we'll try to get your questions to our discussants. So the second discussant from Korea is Oh Hoo-young. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Oh Ho-young from the Korea Research Institute for Vocational Education and Training. It is a great honor to take part in this panel discussion. I would like to talk about three things. So the first thing I would like to talk about is we talk about basic income and compare this with the safety income. So for basic income, I have to think about whether we can actually feasibly implement this when we think about the financial resources we have. So basically, you would need 1 million won per person. Then you also have to think about how this would work together with the existing welfare system. But you think about budget, then you would need a budget of about 600 trillion won. So I think financing this program might be a bit difficult. So if you give about 50,000, 300,000 won as basic income, then you would have your existing welfare system, and all the limitations or problems of the existing welfare system would not be addressed with only 500,000 or 300 won in basic income. In Switzerland, they gave 3 million won in basic income, and they had a referendum, but because of a lot of issues, the referendum did not pass. And then the second thing I would like to talk about is Professor Park mentioned this, and through data analysis, as he showed in his presentation, you have the existing welfare system, and there's a lot of limitations and issues with the existing welfare system. And I believe the problem starts with the fact that they have opportunity to work, but some people, couldn't work, and so the program was for them. And currently, I think the risk that we face is a little bit different. The nature of the risk has changed. So the existing welfare system, how do we improve it, is an issue or a challenge that we are facing. And so I think that safety income might be a stepping stone, and basic income might be our final goal when we actually have a more advanced economy in place. And then with regard to negative income tax and safety income, if you look at negative income tax, you have to change the tax system, and basically you have to completely overhaul the basic livelihood security system, so that might not be possible. But the safety income system actually doesn't overhaul the tax system, but at the same time, you can also use the existing welfare system. So I think it's a very realistic alternative that we have. And I have questions and comments for the two presenters. For Mr. Kim, so you shared with us a lot of data, and it seems that you're systematically producing this data. So is there data that can compare existing welfare system to the safety income program? Then I think if we can compare, we can find ways to improve the safety income project, SSIP. And for Professor Park, in your presentation, I think there's a difference between SSIP and some of the programs, SI. So how do you view SSIP as someone who has done research on SI?
Next, we will be hearing from Professor Sundor Jung from Ewha Women's University. Listening to the two presentations today, I realize that SSIP is meaningful, that it seeks a new welfare system, and that it's an innovative welfare system. And I would like to talk about the evidence-based research. So when we determine whether a policy is effective or not, we need to have evidence on this. That's a very important starting point. As we carry out this experiment on SSIP, we will be accumulating various outcomes and results to determine whether we will adopt this as a policy for our country. And in that sense, I believe that this experiment is extremely important. There was a lot of discussion on this about setting up the data and building up the data. This will be a major challenge for us, in particular regarding Dr. Park's presentation on tracking the economic effects in, for example, in unemployment rates and so forth. I think it's important for us to verify such economic effects. And in terms of the design of the experiment, how are we going to evaluate the results and the outcomes? This is an important challenge for us. And Dr. Kim talked about 7 areas: labor, household, education, housing, and social relationship, satisfaction of life, and training, education, and financial situation, labor and employment. And just because SI has been provided, can really there be effect on all 7 areas? Of course, there might be indirect effects, even if they are not direct effects. Then we will have to think about what the direct impact is. And we need to see if the purpose is to reduce poverty or the poverty rate or to increase labor market participation. We have to have a thorough consensus on this, and we need to come up with some representative indexes to assess the outcome. And of course, if quantitative assessment cannot explain the entire picture, then there has to be qualitative indexes too. We talked about human dignity. We heard about human dignity, and for us to maintain human dignity, what needs to be drawn out from this experiment? This is another area that we need to think about. And one other point is that the 500 households that are included in this group, 100 of them are older than 65 years old. However, in the case of these older members who are participating, due to their age, they will be discriminated in the labor market. So there can be differences in the characteristics of the outcome due to their different ages and different situations. I know that there were some groupings by age, but we need to think about other ways to group these members of the experiment. And after the safety income is received, there will be positive results. However, also we need to think about whether they are making rational and logical consumption. So we need to assess the consumption pattern of the recipients, and I understand that this is included in the index, but it is included in one of the indexes. Therefore, it is not explicit, although it is implicitly put in the indexes. That's all for me.
Thank you very much, Professor Jung Soon-dul. And next, last but not least, we'd like to invite Professor Hong Kyung-jun from Sungkyunkwan University. Hello, everyone. I am Hong Kyung-jun, professor at Sungkyunkwan University. First, I would like to say that I'm very grateful to be attending the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2022. I'd like to thank Mayor Oh for organizing a great forum like this. And I would like to also thank the government officials at Seoul Metropolitan City who are in charge of welfare here in Seoul. So we're talking about the SSIP, which is an alternative guaranteed income project for those living in poverty in Korea. So I think we were able to learn a lot from the 2 presenters, and they provided us with a lot of meaningful information. So if you look at guaranteed income, there's so many different programs in Korea. We have basic pension, pension for the disabled, public assistance such as work and child subsidy, MBLS, industrial accident insurance, public pension, employment insurance. So in Korea, there are many different types of programs, and the social security system, it consists of all of these different programs. And after the 1990s, the social welfare system developed and made quite a contribution to alleviating poverty poverty and inequality in Korea. But in 2000, there was the tragic incident in Songpa, in August in Suwon, and a few weeks ago in Shincheon, there was a tragic incident. So even today, we see that there are blind spots. And as we make the transition to a knowledge society, there are huge disruptions in the labor market. And all of these challenges calls for innovation in the Korean income security system. So I've expressed the idea that basic income or negative income tax proposals are not suitable as an innovative plan for the Korean income security system, especially as an alternative income security system for the poor. And I've shared my thoughts at various seminars, discussions, and media interviews. I mean, there are many reasons to this, but a single program cannot replace the income security systems, which is a combination of programs and institutions with various goals targeting various population groups. So again, you cannot just have a single program replacing all of these different programs. And second, I think I've stressed that the income security system for the poor should be based on proper income wealth test, and at the same time, it should be based on household, so household unit protection. And Professor Park proposed the safe income system in 2016, and there are no other conditions than the income level in reviewing the eligibility, determining the eligibility of recipients. So, and if you look in the presentation, it's about support first and settlement later. So we have to, I believe that the program realizes differentiated welfare, moving beyond the extremes of selective and universal welfare society corresponds to the alternative income security system that I think is suitable. And so, moreover, it seems that this proposal is more desirable and that it is implemented as a pilot project of SSIP, realizing the desires of social policy researchers to implement policies based on performance evaluation. So although there will be formidable difficulties in the process and considerable effort will be required, I hope that the outcomes will spread to the national level, moving beyond the Seoul metropolitan government level. And if I'm offered to some ideas for further discussion, the current systems, self-support assistance, conditional eligibility, and income deductions should be considered in estimating the effect of undermining work motivation. So we think we have to look at, whether the current programs might undermine work motivation, and then if you look at the second presentation, it is necessary to closely review whether it is possible to compare with the recipients of the current system, which is the National Basic Livelihood Security System. So we have to see whether we can compare the beneficiaries of MBLSS and SSIP. So I think maybe next year, this is something that you can look into. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we heard the comments and questions from the discussants. We will now invite the speakers, the presenters, to answer the questions that were asked to them. And after we hear from the two presenters, we will, if we have time, let the discussants and also participants and those participating via YouTube to make their comments or ask questions. First, I want to thank Professor Hillamore. I said that it's different from NIT, and I have been arguing that it is different from NIT, but many people just say that it's a slight modification of NIT, and he said that it's something new, it's a new idea, and I would like to thank him for that comment. I think it's a different, that it's different. It's a new idea. So it there is a system in which we have the current system and it's maintained. We don't have a means test. It is supported first and then settled later on. And this is a new idea, and that is why I think that it should be assessed as a new idea. And Professor Hillamo said that it's only 500 households, but it will be increased to 1,000 and 100. So 1,600 will be a treatment group, and a double of that will be the control group. So 1,600 will be the target, and 3,200 as the control. And next, Dr. O talked about SSIP and SI. And so what is the difference between SSIP and SI? So there is a difference in that the asset is viewed. There's no means test. So in assets, those who are self-employed or the presidents who are actually operating a company that's almost bankrupt, they don't have any income, but they have a car and they have a house, but they commit suicide because of their dire financial situation. So that is why we should first support and then settle later on. So we should not have suicides due to financial situation, and those excluding those, for example, who are living in the most expensive apartment in Korea. The comprehensive asset tax is 1.1 billion. So the means test of 33 million. That is too low of a standard. And economic hardship, when it comes suddenly. So that cutoff, having that cutoff for the assets, I hope that this can be taken away. And I did explain this in detail in my presentation, that all of the welfare system in Korea can lead to a dissolving of a family. So if a 4-household income receives 1 million and one individual household receives 40%, then if you get divorced, you can get 80%. So this is an inducement for dissolving of families. Therefore, it should be divided by N per person. So whether it is support to households or support to individual, there shouldn't be a difference. That's my design. And of course, the support itself is done by households. That's the difference. And that's an area that I would like to see improved, that there should not be a disincentive for households. But there are realistic issues, and so those are the two main differences. And starting at 85% or 100%, that is just looking at there is no difference in the inclination, but just the cutoff. But in any case, as I said in my presentation, the basic philosophy of safety income and the intent of safety income is all incorporated in SSIP, and it is being operated in that way. And I think that we can get some results from SSIP. And Professor Chung talked about the point that we have too many indexes, and we think about the marginal effect. If there is even a marginal effect for an individual, that might be a big impact, and that's why we included many indexes. And I talked about the individual and household, and on the labor willingness and inducement, we understand that. That's correct. And when we started the study in 2019, the 2019 data was the most updated one, KWP data, and we used the 2019 data for analysis. Fortunately, the 2019 data, there wasn't the 30% labor deduction, labor income deduction. That's why I could use consistent data. So that was quite fortunate as a researcher. But in 2020, there are these different factors. So we'll have to consider that in the research and assessment. And SSIP, one great point about it is that EITC and labor inducement or facilitation benefit is maintained. Even if there is a 30% deduction, still there is a 20% point labor inducement factor. And so I think that this can resolve that issue that you pointed out. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Kim. So I will be brief. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Heikki Hilamo for his question, and I think Professor Park just answered your question. And Dr. Oh made some comments about how can we compare and analyze safety income with the existing welfare system, and talked about questions in the survey. So if you look at the questionnaire, our baseline survey for SSIP, it looks at the employment panel, welfare panel, and it also looks like economic activity surveys. And we actually employ the same questions from the existing welfare systems or welfare system surveys. And Professor Jung Sun-dol talked about performance evaluation. And so for you have a treatment group and a control group. And if you compare these groups in advance, the information you get can help you to get more accurate performance evaluation. And of course, there were tragic incidences in Seoul, and there are people, who have deaths or who need extra care and assistance. And so through those issues might be difficult just if you have a quantitative approach. But through qualitative approach, we are going to carry out in-depth interviews and identify issues that we were not able to through our quantitative approach. And there was also a comment about consumption pattern, and I think that we should try to reflect that more in the design of our research. And Professor Hong talked about the current welfare system and comparing that with SSIP. And if you look at the current welfare system, you have the basic pension program. It targets those who have 30% of standard median income. And the criteria is different. So if we analyze the participating households, there are people who were part of MBLS. About 35% were part of MBLSS, and 65% have never been part of MBLS. So of the 480 households, 35%, you could say, have made the shift to safety income. And if you look at the control group, we see similar ratio. About 35% have received benefits under MBLS. So that ratio, you can see, help us to analyze the impact of SSIP. So with that, I would like to conclude my remarks. Thank you very much. So do the discussants have any extra questions, or do we have any questions from the audience? And so those of you who are joining us on YouTube, you can also ask questions. So it seems that there are two people in the audience who want to ask a question. So we're going to give the person sitting in the front opportunity to ask the first question. So actually, before the audience asks a question, I, as a moderator, would like to ask a question. So you said from 500 households, you began with 500 households, and next year you said the number will be increased to 1,600 households. So the number of participating households will increase. If that happens, maybe the experiment model that you designed in the initial stage can be changed a little bit. So maybe there might be some adjustments made to your program. So Professor Park, maybe it might be a little bit different from the model that you initially designed. So maybe there might be some modifications to your model. And in the first session, we talked about German's basic income experiment. And in that presentation, he shared with us what we can evaluate through the experiment and what we can't find out through the experiment. So I think it was quite insightful to find out what you can't evaluate. So what's important is, of course, is evaluation. So what are we going to evaluate? Which indicators are we going to focus on as we evaluate the program? And what are the things that we can't find out through this experiment? So I think we need to clearly define this among experts as we conduct this experiment. So I would like to ask this question to Mr. Kim. And I think the person who's asking the question is a member of the Health and Wealth Committee at Seoul Metropolitan City Council. So I hope the microphone is working. So I'm a member of Seoul Metropolitan Council, and the SSIP model I want it to be successful, so that is why I'm asking this question. And Professor Park, as I was listening to your presentation, the presentation material was in English, so I couldn't check all the details. But one thing that came to my mind is that it seems that the outcome of SSIP seems very positive. But there are economic factors. For example, the economic situation, people are saying next year and the year after that is going to be bad. And many people are facing economic hardship. So there are more people who are experiencing economic hardship than before. So companies, rather than making more profit, they are redesigning or redefining their goals and trying to maintain status quo. So if this situation continues, then maybe that basic line that you set was based on the income level of last year. Then next year and the year after that, maybe you might have to readjust your baseline criteria. And the employment rate, I think, will go down. So there's all these external factors. And have you actually thought about all of these economic external factors? Because those external, in Seoul metropolitan government, we are investing a lot in the SSIP, and the outcome might be different from what we expect. And if we don't incorporate these external factors, even if the program is good, are my comments too long? Yes, we don't have a lot of time. So I'm just curious as to whether we'll be able to get the results that we want. We're in the design phase. I'm sure you've gone through the design phase, but did you also think about economic external factors? I'm sorry, my question was so long. So we'll take one more question. So we'll listen to the last question and then hear answers. So we have 3 minutes left. Can we spend more time, or do we only have 3 minutes? So thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. So you want me to stand up. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. So when I talk to my friends from abroad, Korea is part of G7, and Korea is a very advanced country. And they asked me, why is the suicide rate so high in Korea? So I was thinking about this question. But in Korea, there's social insurance program, and of course, the professor mentioned, there's a lot of these social security programs, but we see more blind spots being created in terms of welfare and so many incidences of suicide. So to address this program, we need basic income, safety income. We need a lot of alternatives. And I think you're making these alternative programs. But despite this, I think that you are not identifying the fundamental issue. So if you can make your question short. So an example might be, in Korea, there's a lot of programs, but if you look at the criteria for benefits, there are discrimination in terms of criteria, and people are turning a blind eye to this. So another example is, if you look at MBLS, the people who are applying for MBLS, as you mentioned before, there are different categories. So I think if you could just maybe ask the question rather than explain. So you're saying that the eligibility criteria for all of the program is different, right? Then we have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Maybe we can use a minute more, but if you could answer the questions, Professor Park. Mr. Kim, so I'll answer first. So I will try to answer Professor Yu's question. So you were talking about how we have 2 times more people participating in the program. So I think you wanted us to compare our program to other programs. So I think in the Seoul Metropolitan Council, members have raised this issue, and many people have mentioned this. I think technically there are some difficulties, and if you look at the design of our program, it might be a little bit difficult to make these adjustments. And in Gyeonggi Province, they also have a safety income program for the rural areas. So you have to look at the initial design of the research program. So changing or modifying this design in midway, you might get different results, or the results might not be intact. And then with regard to Germany's case study, I understand Professor Jürgen Schiff is the person who designed the basic income pilot project, and each country's program has different goals. For the Finnish model, they look at employment motivation. In the German Berlin model, they give 1,200 euro per person, and they want to see how people's behavior or lifestyle changes with this additional income. So that's what the experiment is all about. For SSIP, I would say that the purpose of SSIP is, in my opinion, I talked about the 7 different areas we look at, but the most important area would be, which is problematic right now, isolation and suicide due to isolation. So the areas of the blind spot, we want to see if we can address this through SSIP. And the second thing is, if we provide SSIP, what sort of changes it might bring to employment incentive. So on the various experiments, we initially designed it to have 800 households, and 800 additional households were added, so we could take out the means test, or we could increase the SI benefit, but this was rejected by the city council. So we are talking about suicide, and
some people, they were leading a pretty good life, and then suddenly there is a hardship, and this leads to suicide. So I believe that one of the basic responsibility of a government is to prevent suicides due to economic distress. And the Council Member Hwang made some comments, and we will have 8 rounds of assessment, and the economic situations will have to be put in as control variables, and the statistical economics will try to eliminate the control effect, and I'm sure that they will come up with solutions for that. Thank you. So the benefits are different by the welfare system. Yes, if the safety income is adopted, implemented, it will be a pan-welfare system. So it's like a coat that you're putting on people. It eliminates blind spots and fills in the gaps. We talked about Germany, and there's a mantle agreement. And the industry, when there is a large agreement, then based on that large agreement, it becomes a mantle for the other companies to follow. So when there is this big mantle, then the areas that have gaps will be filled in, and in that sense, it's a pan-welfare system. That's all for me. We would have liked to receive more questions and to give more time to our presenters to answer, but due to time constraint, we will have to end today's international forum here. We are talking about basic income and safety income and new welfare systems, and we are carrying out various experiments, and that is because the existing welfare system is very complicated. There are different benefits given out. There are many blind spots and inefficiencies. That is why there is a need to reform our current welfare system. And based on this understanding, we are discussing ways to find an alternative welfare system that is most realistic and optimal for Korean society. And we hope to see a welfare system that can be implemented well here in Korea. And I want to thank the participants, and also my thanks goes to our presenters and our discussants. We will now go on to the closing and wrap up.
So thank you very much. With this, we will conclude session 2. Once again, we would like to thank the moderator, the discussant, and the presenters for the valuable contribution. So please return to your seats. So I hope you found the discussion very rewarding and enjoyable. So next time, we hope there'll be more time for more questions and more discussions. I know that there were a lot of questions, so if you could also write down your questions on our survey, it would be greatly appreciated. So this brings us to the end of the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2022. So at our registration desk, there is a banner, and in your booklet, there is a QR code, and the QR code will connect you to our survey. So we hope that many of you will answer our survey. The Seoul International Forum on Safety Income will be held next year, and all of your feedback will be very valuable in preparing for next year's forum. Once again, all of the cups and containers that you use, please return to our information desk. So with this, we will conclude the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income. We look forward to your participation at the next forum. Thank you.